Chapter 22:13. Hiss. Luo Qingtong was in pain, and the aura she injected into the life and death yin-yang sword was instantly cut off. Before she could come back to her senses, her vision turned black. Boom! In front of Luo Qingtong appeared a starry sky with an inverted Milky Way. In the boundless Milky Way, one face after another was reflected. Luo Qingtong was extremely shocked to find that one of the faces was actually her from her previous life. The Supreme Ocular Sorcerer, Evil Eye. The Supreme Maiden of the 24th century, dressed in a light blue dress, was as cute and lovely as an oriental porcelain doll. But the smile at the corner of her mouth was unusually cold, and the light at the bottom of her eyes was unbridled and cold. That was her from her previous life, the supreme being of the 24th century in the ancient martial world with supernatural abilities. She did things her own way, unbridled and cold. What was going on? How did he end up here in his previous life? Moreover, those other people were also him? Luo Qingtong looked at the figures and faces in the Milky Way. These people all looked exactly the same as her, only their clothes and auras were different. Looking at these figures, Luo Qingtong suddenly had a strange idea in her mind. These people couldn't all be from her previous life, right? Just as she was thinking about this, a voice suddenly sounded in her mind. Chirp chirp. That's right. It was the voice of Xiao Tuanzi. Luo Qingtong recognized Xiao Tuanzi's voice immediately. Then she saw the soft and cute Xiao Tuanzi appear in front of her. Chirp chirp chirp. Xiao Tuanzi jumped in front of Luo Qingtong, and then looked at the figures in the Milky Way in front of her. Strangely, Luo Qingtong couldn't understand Xiao Tuanzi's words when she was outside, but now she clearly understood the meaning of Xiao Tuanzi's words in her mind. Master, these are all your previous lives. My innate ability is reincarnation. I can help you recall your strongest power from the endless reincarnation. As long as you have reached that level, I can help you summon that power back and let you have that level of strength in an instant. But I'm still young, so the time I can be summoned back is limited. And the stronger you are, the shorter the time you can summon them back. Master, take a look at the reincarnation river. Is there anything stronger than Baigu? Xiao Tuanzi chirped, looking at her with eyes full of expectation, but also very nervous. This ability of his was of little value. It would only be useful if the opponent was extremely powerful. Otherwise, if the other party was a complete weakling in his previous life, his ability would be useless. Therefore, when it was in Luo Qingtong's arms, it didn't tell Luo Qingtong about its ability. He was just afraid that Luo Qingtong would dislike it. However, now that the gigantic skeleton was charging over, it could no longer hide. You should at least try harder. If it really doesn't work, then we'll talk about it. But Master was so powerful, and her ability was so powerful. She must have been very powerful in her previous life, right? With this thought in mind, Xiao Tuanzi activated his innate ability the moment the gigantic skeleton sword charged over. At this moment, time in the outside world was still. Xiao Tuanzi looked at Luo Qingtong expectantly, hoping that she could find an incomparably powerful strength from his innate ability. Chapter 22:14. And when Xiao Tuanzi's word sounded, Luo Qingtong knew what was going on. It turned out that these people were really her previous life. Luo Qingtong looked surprised. She didn't expect Xiao Tuanzi to have such an ability. Although she had heard from Little Pig that the ability of the sector beast was extraordinary. But Xiao Tuanzi was cut out by her. Luo Qingtong didn't know if this had any effect on it. Therefore, when Xiao Tuanzi hid in her arms and didn't move, she didn't think too much about it. But she didn't expect Xiao Tuanzi to have such an ability. It could summon the peak power of her previous life? Luo Qingtong thought so, and immediately looked at the image of her supreme pupil master from the 24th century. She didn't know about other previous lives. But as the supreme pupil master from the 24th century, she knew it very well. Although her strength in her previous life couldn't be compared to now because of the cutoff of spiritual aura. But in her previous life, Luo Qingtong's pupil technique had been cultivated to the peak of perfection. More importantly, in her previous life, she had explored countless deep mountains and old forests and copied many of the immortal secret manuals of the sects whose ancestors were said to be cultivators. At that time, there was no spiritual aura on earth, let alone immortal aura. Therefore, after Luo Qingtong copied those immortal secret manuals, she couldn't use them at all. But this time, in this different world, it was completely different. And in this different world, the Venerable Realm experts had to use the immortal aura to advance. Was the immortal aura in the immortal secret manuals similar to the immortal aura? If so, then the power of those immortal secret manuals was comparable to the power of the Venerable Realm and above. In this way, as long as Luo Qingtong could summon the power of her supreme pupil master from her previous life, relying on the power of her peak pupil technique, she could perfectly display those immortal secret manuals. The power she could display should be able to offset the giant sword light from the huge white bone. As Luo Qingtong thought so, she immediately raised her hand and was about to point at the image of the supreme ocular sorcerer in her previous life. However, at this moment, her gaze suddenly caught a glimpse of a figure not far away. The figure was completely covered in blood-red armor. The armor was unusually tight and charming, outlining the woman's tall breasts and slender waist. That charming and enchanting demeanor seemed to carry 1,000 kinds of amorous feelings, 10,000 kinds of grace. It just so happened that a type of absolute and domineering aura lingered around her body. That 1,000 types of flirtatious and graceful bearing had all transformed into an unbridled arrogance that was above the 9 heavens, a might that ruled over the world. His domineering aura suppressed all worlds. Evil, unrestrained, enchanting, unbridled charm. The evil and domineering aura emanating from her body was even stronger than when she was a supreme ocular technique master in her previous life. Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed when she saw this figure. She immediately raised her hand and pointed at her body. "I choose her." As Luo Qingtong's voice rang out, in an instant, the little dumpling chirped twice, and then there was a boom. The entire starry river hanging upside down in the sky instantly flowed with a rumbling sound. The countless starlight, the power of time, and the light of reincarnation on it all flowed rapidly in an instant. The power of countless stars flowed down in reverse. Chapter 22:15. Boom! In the outside world, time had stopped at the moment when Xiao Tuanzi had bitten Luo Qingtong. Master! Su Yu and the others watched as Luo Qingtong was bitten by Xiao Tuanzi. The aura that they had injected into the life and death yin-yang sword was cut off. They were almost defenseless as they rushed toward the huge bone sword in front of them. They were so anxious that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They were almost heartbroken as they rushed toward Luo Qingtong. Master! They desperately wanted to run toward Luo Qingtong and block this terrifying attack for her. It was so powerful that it almost destroyed this part of the world. Their eyes and faces were full of tears. Master! Everyone knew that they would never be able to block this attack. Even if they paid the price with their lives, the biggest possibility was that they would die together with Luo Qingtong. They were so sad that they couldn't suppress their grief. How could this be? It shouldn't be like this. Master shouldn't have died here. She still had a lot of years ahead of her. She had incomparably monstrous strength and extraordinary abilities waiting for her to display. She should have made a name for herself in the outside world. From then on, she would laugh proudly in the world and awe the heavens. How could she die here? Master! Boss! Everyone's voices were almost crying blood. At this moment, a black lightning bolt not far away rushed toward them. It was as if it could destroy everything in its path. The swift and fierce figure that tore through the air was even fiercer and more wanton than the attack from the huge white bone sword, shattering the surrounding space into pieces. Qing Tong. The moment he saw that Luo Qingtong was about to be hit by the huge bone sword, Yi Qianxian flicked his sleeves and was about to attack regardless of the consequences. Even if his attack was likely to cause a boundless catastrophe in the land of the deceased immortals and even the hidden world, he couldn't care less. However, just as he was about to attack, all of a sudden, boom! An explosive sound suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. Then, a vast and boundless aura suddenly came from the direction of Luo Qingtong. The girl's evil and arrogant aura reached its peak in an instant. Her eyes were blood red, and the images of the myriad worlds and the countless galaxies were reflected in them. Everything in the world, the sun, the moon, and the stars were all in her eyes. Ha! The young girl's figure floated in mid-air, her unruly and arrogant aura directly facing the giant white bone sword in front of her. She lifted her hand and brushed the hair on her forehead. The girl's figure was indescribably languid and domineering, with an unbridled charm. "Ant-like thing, you dare to come and deal with this lord?" The appearance of the giant white bone sword was reflected in his blood-red eyes. Luo Qingtong, or rather, that figure, chuckled and waved her hand. In an instant, Su Yu and the others, who were about to rush in front of her, were all blown away by a gentle force. At the same time, Luo Qingtong lifted a finger and casually pushed it forward. In an instant, the terrifying bone sword attack, which carried an unparalleled aura and almost broke the entire world apart, was blocked by Luo Qingtong's hand. Then, Luo Qingtong suddenly flicked her finger. Clang, clang, clang. An incomparably loud and intense sound suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. That incomparably terrifying giant white bone sword, which towered into the sky, was actually casually flicked by Luo Qingtong. Chapter 22:16. Rumble. Heaven and earth shook violently. Under Luo Qingtong's finger, the huge white bone sword was instantly smashed into pieces. Countless white bones floated down from the sky. It made the peerless figure in the sky look like a demon, evil, domineering, and unparalleled. Roar! The huge white bone was shaken by Luo Qingtong's finger and was instantly sent flying backward. The grief on Su Yu and the rest's faces froze. Their tears stopped in their eyes. Their faces were filled with extreme grief and despair. At this moment, all of them were filled with uncontrollable shock and ecstasy. Master! The group of people's faces were filled with tears, laughter, shock, and joy. Master is fine. Boss is fine. The group of people hugged each other, crying, laughing, and cheering. As for the people from the Sky Yuan sect and the other sects, their mouths were agape as they looked at the domineering figure in the sky. Their eyes were filled with shock and horror. They could not utter a single word. The attack of the 9th-level Amethyst Elder. The peerless attack had been blocked by Luo Qingtong. When they saw the white bone sword turn into white bone powder that floated down from the sky, everyone thought that they had seen wrongly. In the end, they didn't see wrongly, instead. Luo Qingtong, she really did it. Hiss. The Heaven Yuan sect master and the others all gasped in shock. They looked at the peerless figure in the sky and didn't know what to say. This girl's future is limitless. An elder beside the Sky Yuan sect master muttered, "Sect master, our Sky Yuan sect is on the right side this time." His voice was filled with zeal and reverence. He stared at the figure in the sky and said in a low voice, "Our Sky Yuan sect will soar in the future. Our legacy will be in the future." When he said that, the Sky Yuan sect master and the rest of the holy venerables couldn't help but tremble. Then, everyone looked at the girl in the sky with zeal and reverence. They said in a low voice, "Indeed." The Sky Yuan sect master's voice was low and powerful. He said decisively, "Pass down my orders. After we return, Zhu Yi and Su Qing will get married immediately. At the same time, the position of Sky Yuan sect master will be passed to Zhu Yi. When he said that, everyone from the Sky Yuan sect was shocked. However, no one objected to it. Not only did no one express anything, but the crowd instead revealed expressions of ecstasy. The Grand Dean was Luo Qingtong's teacher. With the other party taking over the Heavenly Yuan sect, their relationship with Luo Qingtong would only become closer in the future. Sect Master is brilliant. The people from the Sky Yuan sect were overjoyed. When the people from the other sects heard the Sky Yuan sect master's words, they cursed the Sky Yuan sect for being shameless. They actually wanted to use such a method to deepen their relationship with Luo Qingtong. At the same time, they were filled with envy and jealousy. Why didn't they encounter such a good thing in their sects? Why didn't they have someone who was on good terms with Luo Qingtong? Many people from the other sects felt regretful. Chapter 22:17. Even if it was just to express her attitude, given the girl's character, they would still benefit immensely in the future. Everyone had already regretted it once before. But now, as Luo Qingtong revealed more and more strength, her abilities became more and more powerful. They were so regretful that their intestines were about to be tied up. The sect masters and elders who were originally on good terms with the Heavenly Yuan sect and who were very likely to have a relationship with Luo Qingtong were so regretful that they wanted to jump off a building. While everyone's hearts were filled with shock and fear, not far away, Yi Qianming, who was about to attack, also silently withdrew his attack. He stood above the boundless shattered sky. The surrounding spatial turbulence and fragments violently surged around him, but they were cut into pieces by the invisible aura that seeped out from his body. Not a single bit of it could get close to his body. He looked deeply at the peerless and dazzling figure in front of him. Her figure was hidden in the sky and was not revealed. The girl's figure was too dazzling. Proud like the scorching sun, proud like the dawn, bright like the bright moon, and fierce like the endless waves. Yi Qianxian had never thought that when he rushed over, he would see Luo Qingtong blossoming so recklessly. She was like a stunning flower wrapped in an inconspicuous bud. Once it bloomed, it immediately shed its ordinary appearance. The heavens shook, and the myriad worlds filled with fragrance. The blood-red figure in the sky was arrogant and domineering to the extreme. That unbridled and charming demeanor made it seem as if the myriad worlds were toys in the palm of her hand. She could control the universe with one hand and destroy the world with a flip of her hand. Yi Qianxian stared deeply at Luo Qingtong. The love in his eyes was so uncontrollable that it seemed as if it could burn the entire world. At this moment, the huge skeleton in the sky screamed coldly again after being pushed back by Luo Qingtong. And in the next second, boom boom boom. In the sky, countless black auras surged violently at this moment, and then swept into the huge white bone. Rumble. In the land of the fallen immortals, the black aura of death and hostility were all absorbed by the enormous skeleton in an instant. In just an instant, the huge skeleton's body grew even taller. Not only that, but the deep purple color around its body had also become denser. At this moment, the 9 halos that revolved around it faintly showed signs of merging into one. Roar! After doing all this, the huge skeleton roared angrily and charged towards Luo Qingtong with a heavy step. The foreign experts didn't know how Luo Qingtong managed to block their attack. But this time, they would absolutely not fail again. With the death energy and evil energy of the entire immortal graveyard as their power, this attack was the strongest attack of the 9 realms of the Amethyst Elder. No one below the 9th level of the Amethyst Elder could stop him. The lives of the small realm beast and the young girl were definitely theirs. Once they killed the young girl, they would devour her soul completely. They would imprison her in the land of the fallen immortals forever and never let her reincarnate. Roar! Chapter 22:18. Master. Seeing this attack that was even more majestic and terrifying than the previous attack of the huge bone sword, Suyu and the others' faces instantly froze. They looked nervously in Luo Qingtong's direction. They didn't know if the young girl could block this attack. Master. While everyone was feeling apprehensive, the girl in the sky had a languid expression on her face, and her charm was wanton to the extreme. She glanced lightly at the attack from the giant white skeleton and suddenly chuckled. Originally, I wanted to play with you for a while longer. After all, it wasn't easy for this lord's power to return. However, time's almost up. She raised her head as she spoke, and the blood-red pupils in her eyes began to spin like a blazing sun. Soaring blood sun, 10,000 blood will slash. Luo Qingtong's voice rang out. The girl stood in the sky with her arms crossed. Her gaze was cold and indifferent as she looked at the incoming attack from the giant white skeleton. She didn't even change her posture. In an instant, countless blood-red blazing suns rose in her eyes. Those blood-red blazing suns rose from her eyes, and in the next second, with a clang, they all turned into rays of light that resembled crescent moons. When the blood-red light rose from Luo Qingtong's eyes, an identical scene appeared in the sky outside. Countless blood-red rays of light appeared in the sky, accompanied by violent clanging sounds. Then, with a boom, they flew towards the giant white skeleton in front of them. In an instant it was cut into pieces. Ah! In the sky, the intertwined wills of the extraterrestrial experts had no power to resist the blood-red rays of light. Their bodies were cut into pieces, and their wills were eliminated. Their wills, which were supposed to be illusory, wouldn't be easily hurt by ordinary attacks. However, under those rays of blood-red light, they had no power to dodge or fight back. Their screams were accompanied by those white bones, and in an instant, they were cut into pieces by the swarming rays of light. Rumble. The ground and sky of the fallen immortal land shook violently when the wills of the alien experts were sliced into pieces. The wills of the alien experts were the seal and support of the land of the fallen immortals. Now that the wills of the extraterrestrial experts had been severed and eliminated, the aura and light that shrouded the land of the fallen immortals also vanished in an instant. The air and sunlight from the outside had entered the land of the fallen immortals. From now on, there would be no more immortal burial grounds in the hidden world. Boom boom boom. Amidst the great tremors, the girl in the sky moved lightly, and in a flash, she appeared where Yi Qianxian was hiding. This lord's boy toy? Seeing the person hiding in the air, the girl chuckled and raised her hand to pinch Yi Qianxian's chin. The man did not dodge and allowed her to hold his chin. Firstly, Luo Qingtong was very strong. If he resisted, he would inevitably hurt her. Secondly, this woman actually lost consciousness again. Yi Qianxian frowned as he looked at the girl in front of him, who was even more beautiful and enchanting than usual. This was the second time he had seen Luo Qingtong like this. What was wrong with this woman? Why did she become like this every time she lost consciousness? Chapter 22:19. His body suddenly stiffened. The girl grabbed his chin and pulled him closer to her. Then, she kissed him. This lord likes your concern. This is a reward for you. Remember to keep it up in the future, The young girl smiled wickedly, and then her voice disappeared in his mouth. A pair of thin and soft lips pressed against his. In an instant, Yi Qianxian's mind buzzed, and he didn't know what to do. He suddenly held the back of the young girl's head, and deepened the kiss. Yi Qianxian's willpower was extremely strong. In this world, there was almost nothing that could shake his willpower. But that was before he met Luo Qingtong. After meeting Luo Qingtong, his willpower was as thin as paper. Just a light kiss from the young girl, a glance from her, was enough to break all of his principles and perseverance. Moreover, the young girl came with boundless power. She was domineering, unrestrained, enchanting, and charming. Yi Qianxian couldn't resist at all. He originally wanted to ask who the other party was, and find out some information about Luo Qingtong's loss of consciousness. But the young girl's kiss instantly disintegrated. However, Sensing his movements, Luo Qingtong's eyes widened, and she raised her hand to block his hand. This lord doesn't like male pets taking the initiative? As Luo Qingtong spoke, she opened her mouth and bit Yi Qianqian's lips. She had bitten him hard this time. Yi Qianren couldn't help but groan. She could feel that she had bitten her lips to the point of bleeding. You! Before he could get angry, the young girl's lips pressed against his again. Good boy. Luo Qingtong lightly licked his lips. The evil smile in her eyes was enchanting and domineering. This is your punishment. Remember it in the future. You are this lord's man. Even if you want to take the initiative, only this lord can do it. While speaking, Luo Qingtong directly blocked Yi Qianqian's lips. That action was domineering and powerful. Yi Qianqian was so angry that his face darkened. Did this woman really treat him as a pet boy? Yi Qianqian was grinding his teeth in his heart, but he couldn't do anything about Luo Qingtong. If this woman didn't have the strength, he could easily capture her. However, Luo Qingtong was extremely strong. Yi Qianqian was afraid of hurting her, so he did not dare to make a move. He could only let her suppress him. Just as he was feeling annoyed, Luo Qingtong's body suddenly went soft and she fell on top of him. Clear pupil. Yi Qianqian's eyes narrowed. Ignoring the anger in his heart, he raised his hand to catch Luo Qingtong's limp body. Oh! Luo Qingtong leaned into his arms and felt dizzy. She shook her head with all her might, and it took her a lot of effort to wake up. She felt weak all over, as if all her strength and stamina had been sucked out. What was going on? Luo Qingtong frowned and thought carefully. Then she remembered that she had chosen a power from her previous life to help her with the help of the small sector beast. Was this the after-effect of using the power from her previous life? But why was her mind blank and she couldn't remember anything? This situation was very similar to when she lost control in the past. Luo Qingtong frowned. She was not sure if she had succeeded in using the power from her previous life. She raised her head and looked around, wanting to see how the huge skeleton was doing. Chapter 22:20. She raised her head and saw the man in front of her. Qianming? Luo Qingtong looked at the man in front of her in a daze. The most dazed thing was, why was there a bite mark on Yi Qianming's lips? Luo Qingtong stared at the bite mark and before she could react, she blurted out, Qianming, why is there a bite mark on your lips? Who bit him? Luo Qingtong was about to ask this when she suddenly remembered. With this man's strength, who could leave a bite mark on his lips? It seemed that the bite was not light and blood was seeping out. Luo Qingtong didn't think that Yi Qianming was a masochist. Biting himself. Then it must be, cough, cough, cough. Luo Qingtong laid in Yi Qianming's arms and coughed violently. She also felt that her lips were red and swollen. There was no need to guess who the culprit who bit Yi Qianming was. But why did she bite Yi Qianming for no reason? Luo Qingtong was thinking when she heard the man's cold snort above her head. Humph, what do you think? Ha, ha, Luo Qingtong laughed and changed the topic. That. Qianming, what happened to me? Also, where's that huge skeleton? Yi Qianming narrowed his eyes and looked at her. After confirming that she really didn't know about this, he snorted, your strength increased sharply just now. That skeleton was killed by you. His eyes were deep as he said this. Luo Qingtong's strength was simply terrifying. Even Yi Qianming might not be able to take her down even if his meridians were to burst. How did her strength increase so much all of a sudden? Yi Qianming looked deeply at Luo Qingtong. After the latter heard that she killed the skeleton, her eyes blinked slightly. I really killed it? So the power from her previous life was really used successfully. Yes. Yi Qianming nodded. One hit, one kill. His expression was indifferent. With his strength, he could naturally see that Luo Qingtong was able to kill the skeleton with her first move. The reason why he used 2 moves was because he was intentionally going easy on him. Therefore, he directly described it as a one-hit kill. He knew that what Luo Qingtong wanted to know was her strength at that time. Sure enough, after hearing his words, Luo Qingtong's eyes instantly lit up. A one-hit kill. Didn't that mean that the power of the previous life that he had chosen was much stronger than the Purple Elder's 9th level? It was indeed the right choice to change the candidate at the last minute. It was just that losing consciousness was a bit of a joke. Luo Qingtong didn't like the feeling of being out of control. In the past, because she often lost control, she had to control her temper, not to mention losing her consciousness for a little power. If this drawback was unavoidable, then she might not use the little dumpling's innate ability in the future. Speaking of the little dumpling, Luo Qingtong suddenly remembered that she didn't know where the little dumpling was. She reached out and searched her body. Very quickly, she found the little dumpling lying in her sleeve, looking soft and crying. The little dumpling looked at her with a pitiful expression and pursed its lips. If it wasn't for the fact that it had no strength left, it would have burst into tears long ago. It couldn't be helped. It didn't expect that the power of the previous life that Luo Qingtong had chosen would be so strong. With its current ability, it was completely unable to summon that power. Chapter 22-21. There seemed to be a mysterious power in Luo Qingtong's body that supported the power of her previous life. It was so close to being sucked dry by that power. Woo woo woo. It was really too scary. What kind of master did it find? That kind of power shouldn't even exist in this world. The little dumpling wanted to cry but had no tears. It had suffered a great loss. In a short period of time, not to mention using its innate ability, it didn't even know if it would affect its future growth. So miserable. The little dumpling felt wronged. It looked at Luo Qingtong pitifully and weakly chirped, asking Luo Qingtong to kiss and hug it. Luo Qingtong looked at its appearance and her lips twitched. She wanted to ask the little dumpling what was going on. But looking at it now, forget it, let's talk about it after it wakes up. Luo Qingtong couldn't understand what it was chirping about. And looking at its appearance, it seemed to have suffered a great loss. The innate ability of her previous life seemed to be very harmful to it. If it wasn't necessary in the future, she would try not to use it again. She would wait until the little dumpling grew up. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she immediately picked it up. Then she sent it into the 9-story exquisite pagoda. After doing all this, Luo Qingtong turned around and was about to say something to Yi Qianming. Suddenly, haha! A loud voice suddenly resounded in the sky. Then, the Star Alliance Hall Master and the people of the Star Alliance Hall appeared. They had arrived when Luo Qingtong killed the skeleton. Originally, when they saw Luo Qingtong display her supreme power and kill the huge skeleton of the 9th realm Purple Elder without even moving, the Star Alliance Hall Master and the others were scared out of their wits. Under such circumstances, they didn't dare to provoke Luo Qingtong and turned to leave. But who would have thought that the girl would lose her power in an instant? The Star Alliance Hall Master and the others waited for a long time. After confirming that Luo Qingtong really didn't have the terrifying power from before, they appeared with a big smile. Even the heavens were helping him. The Star Alliance Hall Master was excited. He was sure that Luo Qingtong's terrifying power came from that terrifying sector beast. Otherwise, how could a little girl from the mundane world possess such terrifying strength? The Star Alliance Hall Master was ecstatic. The strength of that sector beast was really beyond his imagination. It could actually raise the strength of a girl from the secular world to the saint realm. Not only that, it could also temporarily increase her strength to such a terrifying level. With that sector beast, what was he afraid of? In the future, he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the entire star field, even in the outer regions. He didn't even care about the position of the Alliance Master of the Star Alliance. Thinking of this, the Star Alliance Hall Master laughed even louder. Ha ha ha. Little girl, hand over the sector beast in your hands. I'll spare your life. Otherwise, as he spoke, his eyes swept past Luo Qingtong, Yi Qianming, and the others. With a cruel and cold expression, he said, everyone related to you will be tortured to death. Little girl, I advise you to obediently do as I say. Don't force me to use extreme measures. Chapter 22-22 Star Alliance Hall Master. Seeing the Star Alliance Hall Master and the others appear, the people from the various sects, including Tian Run Sect Master and the others, who were ecstatic because Luo Qingtong killed White Bone, suddenly felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on their hearts. How could they forget that the people from the Star Alliance Hall were still guarding outside the land of the deceased immortals? If it was before, they wouldn't have to worry at all. Because the people from the Star Alliance Hall weren't very interested in the opening of the land of the deceased immortals. In the past, when the land of the deceased immortals opened, they never appeared. But this time was different. Because Celestial Palace and Beast-Taming King Valley were in an uproar because of the treasure map. The people from Celestial Palace even sought refuge with the Star Alliance Hall and told them everything about the treasure map. Therefore, when the land of the deceased immortals opened this time, the people from the Star Alliance Hall came. Not only that, but the Star Alliance Hall Master himself came, as well as a group of strong people around him. These people were all strong people in the Venerable Realm or very close to the Venerable Realm. The people from the various sects and the Tian Yuan sect thought, and suddenly their hearts jumped. Not because of anything else, but because Luo Qingtong had already lost her strength. These people from the Star Alliance Hall suddenly appeared, and they clearly knew that Luo Qingtong had a sector beast on her body. Did they just arrive here and see the scene of Luo Qingtong killing that huge White Bone? If that was the case, then they should be very clear that Luo Qingtong had lost her strength. Damn it, these people from the Star Alliance Hall came prepared. The people from the various sects and the Tian Yuan sect thought in their hearts, and suddenly they felt a chill. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the aureole behind. Luo Qingtong worked so hard to kill that huge White Bone, but it was all for the people from the Star Alliance Hall. The excitement and ecstasy in everyone's hearts were completely washed away, leaving only indescribable palpitations and depression. Miss Luo, they looked at Luo Qingtong. At this moment, the people from the various sects were either dead or injured. Of course, if they were at their best, they wouldn't be able to deal with the Star Alliance Hall Master and the others. After all, an expert above the exalted realm was enough to slaughter everyone present. It was needless to say that the leader of the Star Alliance had more than one expert above the Venerable State, including him. As the crowd thought of this, they suddenly felt an indescribable sense of dejection. They couldn't help Luo Qingtong at all. After going through life and death situations previously, everyone already had a sense of identity with Luo Qingtong. Regardless of whether the other party saved their lives because of their allegiance or not, Luo Qingtong didn't give up on them. Moreover, they had already sworn to sell themselves to Luo Qingtong as slaves. The latter was dead, and their souls were connected to her, so they couldn't escape. As the crowd thought of this, they couldn't help but feel despair. The Tian Yuan sect master and the others moved their lips, wanting to send a message to Luo Qingtong to leave. They would cover her. However, before he could speak, he recalled that what they were facing this time wasn't the consciousness of a xenorace expert that had been restrained. The latter couldn't leave the forbidden area, or even the land of the fallen immortals, so Luo Qingtong still had room to escape. But this time, they were facing the people from the Star Alliance Hall. The latter wasn't restricted at all. Even if Luo Qingtong escaped from here, where could she escape to? As soon as the Star Alliance Hall Master gave the order, the entire hidden world would be sealed. Chapter 22-23 The joy and excitement on everyone's faces froze on their faces. Su Yu and the others were also very nervous. They looked at the man standing side by side with Luo Qingtong, and they were very uncertain. Ming Zun. He should be able to protect Master, right? Su Yu and the others knew that Yi Qianxian was very strong, but they had never seen him fight with all his strength. They also didn't know if Yi Qianxian could protect Luo Qingtong in such a situation. After all, the girl had almost used up all her trump cards. It was impossible for her to deal with the Star Alliance Temple Master and the others. While everyone was feeling anxious and worried, Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows slightly. She looked at the Star Alliance Palace Master, who was overjoyed and seemed to have victory in his hands, and said, "Are you talking to me?" Threatening her to hand over the sector beast, or else she would be tortured to death. And he wouldn't even let go of the people around her? Luo Qingtong had a smile in the corner of her eyes, but the smile did not reach her eyes at all. As for the Star Alliance Hall Master, when he heard her words, his face immediately darkened. "You know the answer. Don't think you can escape by playing dumb. We all saw the scene just now." The Star Alliance Temple Master's face was cold. He misunderstood Luo Qingtong's meaning and thought she was deliberately playing dumb. Oh. Luo Qingtong thought to herself. These people came at the right time. If they had come a little earlier, they would have ended up like that skeleton. However, their visit this time was no different from their previous visit. Because Yi Qianxian was here. Luo Qingtong smiled and looked at the man beside her. The latter held her waist tightly with one hand, supporting her body to float in the air. From the beginning to the end, his attention was focused on Luo Qingtong, and he didn't even look at the Star Alliance Temple Master and the others. "Qianren, they want me to hand over the sector beast." Luo Qingtong's eyes twinkled with a smile. She had no power now, so she couldn't even use the blood eyes. She didn't try to be brave. She just leaned on Yi Qianxian with a smile and asked, "Do you think I should hand it over or not?" When the man heard her, he looked up, glanced at the Star Alliance Temple Master and the others coldly, and said, "Hand it over. Let them exchange it with their lives." When Yi Qianxian's first sentence was heard, the Temple Master and the others of the Star Alliance Temple Master were ecstatic. He was just about to laugh out loud and praise Luo Qingtong for being a wise woman who knew when to submit to the circumstances. However, Yi Qianxian's last sentence was heard. In an instant, his expression froze. That string of laughter was also stuck in his throat. "Bastards! You two are asking for death." The Temple Master of the Star Alliance Temple Master looked at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, and he was furious. These two were obviously teaming up to trick him. "Okay. You don't want to hand it over?" The Temple Master of the Star Alliance Temple Master looked ferocious. He looked at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, raised his hand, and shouted, "Arrest them. I don't believe that we can't interrogate them and find out the whereabouts of the sector beast." If he wasn't afraid that Luo Qingtong would kill the sector beast in the end, he would have killed them. The Temple Master of the Star Alliance Temple Master would have killed these two who didn't know what was good for them. How dare they trick him? Chapter 22-24. The Star Alliance Palace Master's expression was cold and stern. Following his order, a group of people from the Star Alliance Palace immediately rushed toward Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. Everyone's expression was very lazy and casual. They didn't take Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian seriously at all. In fact, that was indeed the case. These two people, although one of them had obtained a sector beast and was very powerful. Unfortunately, in order to deal with that huge skeleton, she had used up all of her strength. Now, she didn't have any strength left in her body. There was nothing to be afraid of. As for Yi Qianxian, it was needless to say. The group of people from the Star Alliance Palace were very familiar with the strong people in this hidden world. But they had never even seen Yi Qianxian before. It was obvious that the other party was not even ranked in the hidden world. Under such circumstances, what kind of power did they need to spend to capture these two people? Of course, they had to be a little careful and not let these two people escape. After all, that girl had a sector beast on her. The group of people from the Star Alliance Palace didn't know that the treasure in this fallen immortal land was actually a sector beast. And it was obtained by this girl in front of them. Thinking of the scene they saw when they were hiding in the dark, the scene of Luo Qingtong dealing with that huge white skeleton with one hand, everyone's hearts trembled with excitement. If it weren't for the fact that the Star Alliance Palace Master's strength was far above theirs and was about to break through the Venerable Realm and enter the Red Venerable Realm, they wouldn't have been able to resist. They probably wouldn't have been able to resist the urge to snatch Luo Qingtong away. As the group of people thought so, they had already rushed in front of Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian and raised their hands to grab Luo Qingtong. As for Yi Qianxian, he was just incidental. Only a few attacks blasted toward him. The group of people from the Star Alliance Palace was confident in their strength. Even if it was just a few casual attacks, the other party would definitely not be able to escape. As for whether or not the other party would be seriously injured, and to what extent, it was not within the scope of their consideration. After all, the other party had spoken without thinking and had offended the palace master to such an extent. Under such circumstances, did he still want to live well? It would be good enough if the palace master didn't use him as a tool to interrogate Luo Qingtong and torture him to death. In this world, there were always so many people who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and were bent on seeking death. The Star Alliance members sneered. However, right at this moment, bang bang bang. Yi Qianren, who they didn't even put in their eyes, suddenly emitted waves of energy aura around him. Yi Qianxian held Luo Qingtong in his hand and stood in midair, his eyes cold. His figure didn't move at all as he faced the attacks of the Star Alliance members. The aura around his body shook, and in an instant, screams rang out. Ah! The Star Alliance members besieging Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, under the shock of the aura around Yi Qianxian, in an instant, as if they had suffered a terrible attack, their limbs were directly blasted out, and their faces swelled up as they flew outside. Bang bang bang. Their figures crashed heavily onto the ground, but in an instant, they lost their breath. What? The Star Alliance Palace Master's heart trembled violently. He looked at the figures of those people who had completely lost their breath after crashing onto the ground and was extremely shocked. With the strength of these people, even if he attacked with all his strength, he might not be able to kill them all in an instant. Chapter 22-25. His face was full of shock. At this moment, Yi Qianxian's cold voice sounded. I said, you want the sector beast? Sure. You can exchange it with your lives. You. The Star Alliance Temple Master's heart skipped a beat when he saw the man's eyes that seemed to contain a bloody sword. Don't be so smug. He shouted harshly. Our Star Alliance Temple Master has more people in the land of the deceased immortals. The Star Alliance Temple Master's palms were all sweaty. The man beside Luo Qingtong was so strong. But fortunately, he was already prepared for this. His people were all around the land of the deceased immortals. As long as he used the Star Alliance Temple's unique summoning talisman to summon them. Immediately, those people in the Star Alliance Temple Master's temple would appear beside him. Thinking of this, the Star Alliance Temple Master raised his hand. Buzz. In the outside world, the Star Alliance Temple guards outside the land of the deceased immortals were all shocked when they saw the land of the deceased immortals collapse. At this moment, the teleportation summoning talismans on their bodies lit up. Everyone's face froze, and then they said in a low voice, it's the Temple Master's emergency summon. Let's go. Their voices sounded, and then they mobilized the aura in their bodies to respond to the summon of the Star Alliance Temple Master. In an instant, the figures of the people from the Star Alliance palace who were guarding outside the land of the fallen immortals disappeared. Swish! 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 In the forbidden area, rays of light lit up beside the Star Alliance Temple Master. All of the people from the Star Alliance palace that he had gathered had all appeared. Humph! You didn't expect this, did you? I had such an arrangement. Huh! The Star Alliance Temple Master laughed loudly. The man beside Luo Qingtong was smart enough to hide his identity and take them by surprise. But so what? He had already made full preparations for this. Today, none of them could leave this place. Hand over the sector beast. I can even leave your corpses intact. Otherwise. The Star Alliance Hall Master sneered. Su Yu and the others looked at the figures that appeared one after another beside the Star Alliance Palace Master. They instantly clenched their fists tightly, and they were extremely nervous. They didn't know if Yi Qianming could deal with so many Star Alliance members. After all, the members of the Star Alliance Hall were different from others. The weakest among them was a paragon. At this moment, the Star Alliance Temple Master summoned them through the summoning talisman. There were more than 1,000 people in the Star Alliance Hall. With so many powerhouses here, could Ming Zun deal with him? Luo Qingtong looked at these people and frowned slightly. She saw that there weren't many people around the Star Alliance Hall Master, so she didn't expect him to be able to gather them. The aura of the land of the fallen immortals had been broken. Otherwise, the people from the Star Alliance Hall wouldn't have been able to teleport in. She looked up at the man beside her. Qianming, we can't let these people go. Are you confident? Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed. The sector beast was born. It was fine if the Star Alliance Temple Master and the others didn't know that she had the sector beast. But since they already knew, these people couldn't leave here alive. Luo Qingtong secretly calculated what she should do if Yi Qianming couldn't keep them all here. It wasn't that Luo Qingtong didn't believe in Yi Qianming's strength. It was that the man's meridians were injured. Luo Qingtong couldn't let him take the risk. Chapter 22-26. Yes. Yi Qianming's eyes, which seemed to contain countless bloody swords, coldly stared at the Star Alliance Hall Master and the others. He was waiting for the moment when the Star Alliance Hall Master summoned everyone. Otherwise, when the other party took out the summoning talisman, he could easily kill them. The reason why he didn't do anything was to let the Star Alliance Hall Master summon everyone. Just as Luo Qingtong said, these people knew that she had contracted a sector beast, so none of them could be left alive. The Star Alliance Hall Master summoned everyone, which saved him a lot of trouble. Come out. As Yi Qianming's voice sounded, in an instant, several figures appeared beside him. The aura that soared into the sky was no less than that of the Star Alliance Hall Master. These people were none other than Bei Qing, Wind Feather, and the others. They had arrived before the Star Alliance Hall Master and the others, but because they didn't have Yi Qianming's order, they had been hiding and didn't show themselves. At this moment, they all bowed respectfully to Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming. Master. Evil Doctor. Everyone's respect came from the bottom of their hearts. Except for Bei Qing, Wind Feather, and the others who already knew about Luo Qingtong's strength and unpredictable means. The other powerhouses of the Black Field, who had been summoned from outside the True Spill continent, were also impressed by the scene of Luo Qingtong killing the huge skeleton. Unlike the Star Alliance Hall Master and the others who were ignorant, the powerhouses of the Black Field knew that even if Luo Qingtong had contracted an adult sector beast, she might not be able to display such strength. Therefore, there must be something special about this girl. What's more, they had just seen with their own eyes that Yi Qianming was extremely indulgent towards Luo Qingtong and deeply in love with her, which was incomparable. Master's approval, powerful ability. Luo Qingtong had everything. Everyone naturally nodded and bowed willingly, treating her as their future mistress. Yes. Luo Qingtong looked at them and nodded. Then she smiled at Yi Qianming and asked, "When did you prepare it?" "Not long after you entered the land of the fallen immortals." Yi Qianming's expression was indifferent. He didn't say that he had already prepared people before Luo Qingtong entered the land of the deceased immortals. However, when the land of the deceased immortals was shaken, the Star Alliance Hall Master mobilized people, so he had to make new arrangements. Naturally, he would ensure that this woman was safe and sound. No matter how much effort and price he had to pay. Yi Qianming looked deeply at Luo Qingtong. Not far away, the leader of the Star Alliance was stunned when he saw Beiqing and the others. You. He looked at Beiqing and the others in shock. Their auras were no weaker than theirs, and he could not believe what he was seeing. How is this possible? You. He raised his hand and pointed at Beiqing and the others. He couldn't believe everything in front of him. These people in front of them were not inferior to them at all. What was going on? Who were the other party? At this time, the leader of the Star Alliance Hall Master no longer thought that Yi Qianming was just a nobody in the land of the hidden world. How could a nobody have such strength? The other party must be someone from the outer region. But why had he never heard of anything related to the other party in the land of the hidden world? After all, if someone from the outer region wanted to enter the true Spill continent, they had to go through the stargate of the land of the hidden world. Chapter 22-27. Wait, there was a way to not go through the star gate in the hidden world. That was, to tear open the barrier of the continent and directly descend on the continent. Thinking of this, the Star Alliance Temple Master took a deep breath. Tearing open the space barrier was something that only masters above the Green Supremacy realm could do. The man in front of him actually had such strength? The Star Alliance Temple Master took a deep breath and was shocked. A master of the Green Supremacy realm. He looked at Yi Qianming in shock. At this moment, the man waved his hand lightly. Kill. Leave no one alive. Yi Qianming didn't finish his words, but Beiqing and the others all understood what he meant. The news that the evil doctor had successfully contracted a sector beast must not be spread easily. If the Star Alliance Temple Master and the others didn't have any evil intentions, it would be fine. Master might have other ways to make them keep their mouths shut. But now, since they dared to have evil intentions, these people could only wait for death. Boom! Beiqing, Feng Yu and the others thought, and the aura around them suddenly burst out. Because they were in the hidden world, they didn't need to suppress their strength as much as they did in the secular world. Beiqing and the others shot towards the Star Alliance Temple Master like lightning. The latter and the others were already stunned when Beiqing and the others appeared. In the land of the deceased immortals, there were forces that were comparable to the Star Alliance Temple Master. How was this possible? However, the strength of Beiqing and the others couldn't be faked. The people of the Star Alliance Temple Master were almost at a loss as to what to do. As for the Star Alliance Temple Master, the moment Beiqing and the others rushed over, he knew that he was definitely done for this time. With Yi Qianming's strength, it would be fine if there were no other people around him. Now that Beiqing and the others were here, the Star Alliance Temple Master's previous idea of using numbers to deal with him was completely in vain. There was an indescribable uneasiness in his heart. When Beiqing and the others rushed over, he suddenly turned around and quickly rushed out. He wanted to leave this place immediately. If he couldn't get the sector beast, he couldn't get it. With this information, when he returned to the Star Alliance, he could use this information to exchange for great benefits. At that time, there would naturally be someone to deal with Luo Qingtong and the others. With that thought in mind, the Star Alliance Hall Master moved extremely fast. However, he had only taken a few steps forward. Boom! Yi Qianming appeared in front of him in an instant. Bang! The man flicked his sleeve, and in the next second, a majestic attack shot out from Yi Qianming's sleeve in an instant. Bang! When the Star Alliance Hall Master saw Yi Qianming's attack, he hurriedly tried to dodge. However, the man's strength was vast and ferocious. Before he could dodge to the side, he was swept away by the shockwave of the attack from afar. In an instant, the Star Alliance Hall Master was sent flying while coughing up blood. Ah! His body rubbed against the ground fiercely and flew back hundreds of meters before landing heavily on the ground. Puff! The Star Alliance Hall Master spat out blood. At this moment, buzz! Above the sky, a huge light gate appeared. The invisible power of the space barrier instantly rippled with the appearance of this light gate. Rumble! The spiritual chi in the entire hidden world began to surge violently at this moment. Chapter 22-28 Starry Sky Gate. This is the Starry Sky Gate. Under the attacks of Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others, the group of people from the Star Alliance Palace could not fight back at all. They were all knocked to the ground and were about to be killed by Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others. Seeing the scene in the sky, they were overjoyed. It was not for anything else. The scene of the Starry Sky Gate in front of them was not something that could appear at ordinary times. Only powerhouses above the Cyan Venerable Realm would appear in the sky through the Starry Sky Gate. It was a powerhouse above the Cyan Venerable Realm. The people from the Star Alliance Palace were ecstatic. Especially the Palace Master of the Star Alliance. He climbed up from the ground and crazily urged the power in his body to rush towards the Starry Sky Gate. Help! Sir! We are subordinates of the Star Alliance. We are from the Star Alliance Palace. Sir, please save us. As the Palace Master of the Star Alliance rushed towards the Starry Sky Gate, a group of figures appeared in the Starry Sky Gate. These people were none other than Mo Zhuling and the others who came to the True Spill Continent after finding out about Yi Qianxian's whereabouts. This is the True Spill Continent. Mo Zhuling led a group of Star Alliance powerhouses to look at the scene in the hidden world. He frowned slightly. It was not because of anything else. The spiritual energy in this continent was too scarce, too barren. There was not even a bit of immortal spiritual energy. Ordinary Venerable Realm powerhouses could not even display 1/10 of their strength here. How could such a peerless, powerful, and handsome man appear in such a place? Even if he was looking for a continent as a temporary base, there was no need for him to look for such a low-level continent. Mo Zhuling frowned. He really disliked the low level of spiritual energy here. But when he thought of Yi Qianxian, he had no choice but to endure it. Just as she was about to order her people to search for Yi Qianxian's whereabouts on this continent, she heard the voice of the Star Alliance Hall Master. Soon after, he rushed over with a disheveled appearance. His entire body was covered in blood. Who is it? Mo Zhuling looked at the Hall Master of the Star Alliance and frowned. At this moment, a guard beside her took a step forward and sent the Star Alliance Hall Master flying with a blow. How dare you? How dare you offend young miss? Bang! The Star Alliance Hall Master was sent flying by this attack and spat out another mouthful of blood. However, a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. Not for anything else, but because he recognized their clothes. They were from the Star Alliance. Are they from the Star Alliance? Or was it the eldest miss? Thinking of the princess that was held in the palm of his own Star Alliance Hall Master, the Star Alliance Hall Master was instantly ecstatic. He quickly got up from the ground and did not even bother to wipe the blood from his mouth. He quickly knelt on the ground and said to Mo Zhuling, "Young miss. Save me. I am the Hall Master of the Star Alliance Hall Master of the True Spill Continent. Someone wants to harm our Star Alliance and sneak into the True Spill Continent to kill all of us from the Star Alliance Hall." The Hall Master of the Star Alliance Hall Master was very cunning. He did not mention the matter of the sector beast. Instead, he casually accused Yi Qianxian of something. Chapter 22-29. Although he didn't know why these people from the Star Alliance would appear here, since they were here, then they were safe. Not only that, but they could also kill the people around Luo Qingtong. He didn't expect that the man beside Luo Qingtong was actually someone from outside the Star Alliance. Moreover, he had such a strong force in his hands. The Star Alliance Temple Master's heart was filled with resentment and palpitations. Just a little bit more. He was about to die at the hands of the other party. But it didn't matter now. The eldest miss and the others were here. Luo Qingtong and the others were dead meat. Thinking of this, he couldn't wait to complain to Mo Zhuling and the others. He said that Luo Qingtong and the others were heinous beyond redemption because of the Star Alliance's supreme status in this star field. Eldest miss. These people are up to no good. You have to make a decision for us. I suspect that they have an even bigger conspiracy behind their backs. Maybe they were instigated by someone else to deal with our Star Alliance. Maybe they have accomplices in other continents, waiting to kill the people of the Star Alliance Temple. The Star Alliance Temple Master knelt on the ground, weeping as if he was complaining. He lowered his head, seemingly respectful. But in fact, his eyes were completely cold and treacherous. Mo Zhuling and the others heard this and immediately frowned. There's such a thing? A Star Alliance powerhouse beside Mo Zhuling coldly said, "Where are those bastards?" There was a ferocious look on his face. For this kind of thing, he would rather kill the wrong person than let them go. Daring to kill the people of the Star Alliance Temple in their star field was a provocation to the Star Alliance. They absolutely couldn't be forgiven. As soon as this powerhouse said this, the Star Alliance Temple Master felt a burst of pride and joy in his heart. He quickly said, "They're down there." As he said this, he rolled his eyes and said, "Down there is a special place in the true Spill continent called the Land of the Fallen Immortals. It's said that there are treasures inside. After those people went in, the treasures disappeared. I don't know if they got it or the treasures ran away. When the eldest miss and the other sirs go over, those people might use the treasures to beg for mercy." As he said this, the Star Alliance powerhouse sneered and said, "It's just a 9th-class low-level continent. What treasures can there be?" The Star Alliance elite felt disdain in his heart. The Star Alliance powerhouses and the others around him were also Star Alliance powerhouses as heart. A mere item from a 9th-grade inferior continent wanted to bribe them? What a jokes! Not to mention, Mo Zhuling. Her expression was calm and she did not take the Star Alliance Palace Master's words seriously at all. "Let's go," she said to the people around her. "Let's settle this first. Let's go find that young master." "Yes." The Star Alliance members responded. Seeing this, the Star Alliance Temple Master felt an indescribable joy and pride in his heart. With his words, even if Luo Qingtong and the others wanted to use the sector beast to beg for mercy, no one would believe them. He was ecstatic in his heart and led the Star Alliance members downwards. In the Land of the Fallen Immortals, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others frowned as they looked at Yi Qianxian. "Master, it's the Star Alliance's people." They didn't expect the Star Alliance's people to appear here. Chapter 22-30. When their voices sounded, the group of people who had just surrounded Luo Qingtong turned deathly pale. Star Alliance? Was this the Star Alliance they were thinking of? Extraterrestrial Star Alliance. Star Alliance's headquarters. The true master of this star field. Thinking that the person who had appeared in the Door of Light was actually such a giant, the group of people from the various sects turned pale without a trace of blood. The one who had come was actually someone from the Star Alliance. How could this be? No one could understand why someone from the extraterritorial Star Alliance would appear here. Logically speaking, such a colossal force shouldn't appear in such a lowly continent like theirs. Although saying this was a bit too demeaning. But the group of people from the various sects knew that the level of the true spill continent in this star field was very, very low. It was so low that it was hard to imagine. In their continent, there wasn't even the slightest bit of immortal spiritual energy. The amount and quality of immortal spiritual energy completely determined the level of a continent and the development of its powerhouses. The richer the immortal spiritual energy, the higher the level of the continent, the more powerhouses it could give birth to, and the more powerful they would be. But the true spill continent didn't have any immortal spiritual energy. Not only that, but the spiritual energy in the continent wasn't particularly rich. Therefore, the powerhouses it could give birth to were very few. Including the beast tamer King Gu Guju who had died before, the number of Saint Venerable powerhouses in the entire true spill continent's hidden world didn't exceed 500. 500. An entire continent. With such a large population base, the number of top-notch experts that could be born was only 500. Could it be that this was all because their talent was too poor? Out of so many people, only 500 had the talent to become a holy venerate? How was this possible? That was because they didn't have enough resources and spiritual energy to break through. Spiritual energy was too scarce, every step forward was extremely difficult. If Luo Qingtong hadn't been able to purify the immortal jade bones in the graveyard of immortals, she wouldn't have been able to cultivate. She and the people around her wouldn't have been able to increase their strength so quickly. After all, even the cleverest housewife cannot cook a meal without rice. No matter how talented a person was, without sufficient resources and spiritual energy, they could only slowly endure. Not to mention the fact that there was no immortal qi in the continent. If he wanted to break through to the exalted realm, he would have to leave this place and head to the outer realm. Thus, the strength of powerhouses in true spill continent was extremely low. Compared to the other middle-ranked and high-ranked continents, it was simply incomparable. On the other hand, those exalt realm experts disdained to come to such a place. Therefore, they couldn't figure out why people from the Star Alliance would appear here. After all, Exalt Realm experts weren't ordinary Exalt Realm experts who were able to roam the region in the name of the Star Alliance. He was at least a Green Supremacy Realm expert. Not to mention the scene of the Starry Sky Light Gate that had just appeared. It was obvious that there were experts above the Cyan Venerable Realm among the people who had come. What was going on? The strength of these people was enough to move unhindered through the star field, so why would they appear in a small 9th-grade low-level continent? Everyone's hearts were filled with indescribable fear and despair. When the huge skeleton appeared, their hearts were filled with despair. When the Temple Master of the Star Alliance appeared, their hearts were filled with despair. But that couldn't compare to the despair they felt at this moment. Chapter 22:31. When that skeleton appeared, they could still escape, as long as they escaped from the restricted area. When the leader of the Star Alliance appeared, Yi Qianxian's strength and power gave them hope. But at this moment, the people of the Star Alliance appeared. What else could they do? They couldn't hope that Yi Qianxian was stronger than the Star Alliance, could they? That was simply a fantasy story. It was impossible. Even the Grand Dean felt an uncontrollable sadness and despair in his heart. The strength of the Star Alliance was already the strongest in this star sector. Even if he knew that Yi Qianxian was also from another star region, how could he defeat the Star Alliance? Thinking of this, he felt bitter in his heart. He originally thought that if he could go back alive this time, he would hold a proper wedding with Su Qing. But now, it seemed that there was no chance. And Su Yu and the others felt their hearts tighten. Master, they looked at Luo Qingtong with red eyes and their hearts collapsed to the extreme. How could this be? Ming Zun was about to make a move and Master's crisis would be resolved. Now that the people of the Star Alliance had arrived, Master, Su Xiaoxiao couldn't hold it in anymore. She bit her arm and sobbed bitterly. She didn't want Master to see her like this, but she couldn't help it. She was a crybaby to begin with. Because of Luo Qingtong, she became strong step by step. But now, Luo Qingtong was about to face a desperate situation. And in this desperate situation, there was nothing they could do. Suddenly, they couldn't bear it anymore. Beside her, Yuan Little Overlord, Sima Ju, Ling Tianhan and the others all had red eyes and silently shed tears. And Luo Qingtong straightened her back after Mo Zhuling and the others appeared. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at the figure flying down from the sky. She was constantly thinking of a way to resolve this crisis. However, after calculating all the chips in her hands, she realized that there was nothing she could do about it. The strength of the people of the Star Alliance was extraordinary. Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold as she looked at the figures that were rushing towards her. Her palm was cold. Right at this moment, a broad palm stretched out from the side and held her hand in the center of it. Don't worry. Yi Qinxian's eyes were cold. He completely wrapped Luo Qingtong's hand in his palm and warmed her cold fingers little by little. You have me. You have me. These few words immediately calmed all the coldness and uneasiness in Luo Qingtong's heart. She looked at the man beside her. Ming Zun slowly raised his head, looked at Luo Qingtong's eyes. Luo Qingtong, you should try to trust me. Didn't she think that he would be by her side? Yi Qianming's eyes were deep. Luo Qingtong looked at him and her heart was in a trance. She really didn't think of it. Luo Qingtong was used to relying on herself. She had never thought of taking the initiative to rely on someone in a life and death crisis. So just now, Yi Qianming's existence was completely ignored by her. Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianming. Chapter 2232. His eyes were cold to everything he looked at. Only when he looked at her, his eyes were warm. It was not the kind of warmth that was like a spring breeze. It was the kind of warmth that was like the spring snow melting and the iceberg bursting. It was as if all his feelings and emotions were only for her. I won't let anyone hurt you. Qingtong, trust me. Yi Qianming looked deeply at the girl in front of him. This woman had always been stubborn and independent. Whenever she encountered something, she would always solve it by herself and rarely relied on him. There were only a few times when he took the initiative to attack. Otherwise, this woman would have solved it by herself. This kind of Luo Qingtong made Yi Qianming love and feel depressed. He loved that she was independent and strong with extraordinary means, which made her feel proud. He was depressed that she was too independent and strong. She carried everything by herself and never knew how to rely on him. Yes. Luo Qingtong looked at him and nodded. Unconsciously, she relaxed her tense body. She let Yi Qianming hold her tightly in his arms. Her heart was full and she didn't know what to feel. So this was the feeling of having someone to rely on? In her previous life, Luo Qingtong was besieged on all sides and hunted down everywhere. No one had ever stood in front of her to protect her and tell her that no one could hurt her. She clasped Yi Qianming's hand tightly. She couldn't tell what feeling was surging in her heart at this moment. But this man, from now on, no matter if it was the heavens or the earth, the blue sky or the yellow springs, she would never let go of him. Life, he was her man. Death, he was her soul. Luo Qingtong pursed her lips tightly. She didn't know that at this moment, there was a trace of extremely evil and cold-bloody light in her eyes. This light was abnormally cold and cruel. When it flashed in Luo Qingtong's eyes, she was like a queen who ruled the world. But Luo Qingtong's eye technique was obviously no longer usable. The bloody pupils in her eyes didn't even appear. He didn't know where this blood-red light came from. It quickly flashed and disappeared from Luo Qingtong's eyes. Luo Qingtong was unaware of all this. She held Yi Qianming's fingers tightly. At this moment, Mo Zhuling and the others, as well as the Star Alliance Hallmaster, appeared in front of them. "Young miss, sirs. They are the thieves." The Star Alliance Hallmaster arrogantly pointed at Luo Qingtong, Yi Qianming, and the others. Especially Yi Qianming. If it weren't for this man, she wouldn't have been beaten so badly just now. Luo Qingtong and the sector beast in her hands had long fallen into his hands. When he thought about how he almost died in Yi Qianming's hands, the Star Alliance Hallmaster's heart was filled with indescribable ruthlessness and coldness. This man should just wait for his death. Later, he would let him know what the consequences of attacking him were. When the Star Alliance Hallmaster raised his finger to point at Luo Qingtong and the others, Mo Zhuling and the others had already seen Yi Qianming standing in the crowd like a crane in a flock of chickens. The man wasn't wearing a mask. With just a glance, Mo Zhuling and the others recognized him. "It's you?" Mo Zhuling's face was filled with joy. She didn't expect to meet this man as soon as she arrived. The other party was just as she had imagined. He was shockingly charming and handsome. Chapter 22-33. When the Star Alliance Temple Master heard the surprise and excitement in her voice, he thought he had heard it wrong. This must be anger and coldness. As he thought about it, he felt even more proud. It seemed that he had drawn a lot of hatred just now. Miss already hated them so much. Next, it was time to cut them into pieces. As long as these people died, Luo Qingtong and the sector beast on her would immediately fall into his hands. Thinking of this, he quickly said, "That's right. Miss, it's them. These people forced their way into the True Spill continent and wanted to harm the Star Alliance. The people of the Star Alliance Temple fought with all their might, but they were outnumbered. Miss, you have to uphold justice for us." The Star Alliance Temple Master pretended to be good at singing. In the end, crocodile tears flowed from his eyes. Hearing his words, Su Yu and the others were all furious. "Shameless! You're twisting the truth." Su Xiaoxiao and the others were so angry that they trembled. The Star Alliance Temple Master looked at them with a sneer and said, "Twisting the truth? How am I twisting the truth?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed at the people of the Star Alliance Temple who were either seriously injured or dead. "You didn't hurt these people," he said with righteous indignation. "You attacked the people of the Star Alliance, and you still think you're in the right? Then tell me, if you didn't have evil intentions towards the Star Alliance, why did you attack the people of the Star Alliance Temple?" Su Xiaoxiao and the others were speechless. They couldn't tell the people of the Star Alliance that the Temple Master and the others had evil intentions towards them because Luo Qingtong had the Sector Beast. That was why they attacked them. First of all, they might not believe them. Second of all, once the matter of the Sector Beast was exposed, Luo Qingtong's situation wouldn't be any better. It would only be more dangerous. "You!" Su Xiaoxiao and the others were so angry that their faces turned red. Even Su Yu and the others looked at the Star Alliance Temple Master with cold eyes. The other party was shameless to the extreme. When the Star Alliance Hall Master saw how speechless they were, he felt even more pleased with himself. He knew that these people would not dare to expose the existence of the Sector Beasts. As he thought this, he coldly said to Mo Zhuling and the others, "Eldest Miss, sirs, look. They have nothing to say." In fact, Yi Qianming and the others had not said a word from the beginning. Did an ant like him have the right to defend himself? Not to mention Mo Zhuling and the others, even if the leader of the Star Alliance was here, Yi Qianming's expression wouldn't change at all. "When I went to hunt the nine-tailed celestial fox, it was you guys from the Star Alliance who stopped me. Do you still want to court death today?" Yi Qianming's voice was cold. When Mo Zhuling and the others heard his words, they were all shocked. Heavenly Nine-Tailed Fox. Mo Zhuling's eyes glowed. She knew that the Alliance had organized a hunt for the Heavenly Demon Fox last time. 36 Grand Hall Masters gathered together and returned in defeat. More than half of the 36 Grand Hall Masters were seriously injured. The others were all dead. No one survived. According to them, they had encountered a mysterious strong man. If it wasn't for the fact that the other party's target was the nine-tailed celestial fox, they wouldn't have been able to escape. None of them would be able to escape. All of them would die there. The Star Alliance strong men beside Mo Zhuling were also very shocked. Of course, they knew about this. At that time, the Alliance had made a big fuss over this matter. They searched everywhere for the identity of the mysterious strong man, but they found nothing. They didn't expect it to be done by this man. But it was normal. Chapter 22-34. It was just that they didn't think too deeply about it before. Now that they heard Yi Qianming's words, they were shocked. The Star Alliance Hall Master laughed when he heard Yi Qianming's words. Ridiculous. It was as if he heard an incredible joke. Hunting the nine-tailed fox? Who do you think you are? His face was full of mockery. That time, all the top powerhouses in the Star Alliance went to hunt the nine-tailed fox, except for the Alliance Master who was training outside and in seclusion. Everyone else came out in full force. However, who would have thought that they were almost wiped out in the end? After that, the Star Alliance was troubled by many things and was completely under pressure. The incident caused a sensation at that time. In the entire star field, the high-level continents and some powerful mid-level continents had all heard about it. They didn't know where this man got the news from, but he actually used it as a big bad wolf. Ridiculous. Did he know what level the person who killed the nine-tailed fox was? At that time, so many top powerhouses in the Star Alliance couldn't do anything to the other party and the nine-tailed fox was forcibly taken away by someone. The other party actually used this incident to show off in front of them. Ridiculous. I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. The person beside me is our Star Alliance's young miss, the Alliance Master's beloved daughter. You want to use this matter to make us back off? That's ridiculous. The Star Alliance Hall Master said with an arrogant expression, as if he was a villain who had succeeded. However, before he finished speaking, Mo Zhuling's cold and gloomy voice sounded. Shut up. Slap him. Yes. The Star Alliance Hall Master was even more proud when he heard this. Yes, we do need to slap him. He actually dared to impersonate that mysterious powerhouse to threaten us. He really doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Before he finished speaking, a Star Alliance powerhouse standing behind Mo Zhuling instantly rushed out. Then, he slapped his palm toward him. Pa! A sharp and clear sound rang out. In an instant, the Star Alliance Hall Master was sent flying by this fierce slap. Ah! He screamed miserably as he fell in front of Luo Qingtong, Yi Qianming and the others. He fell flat on his face. Not only that, his right cheek fiercely swelled up, and then with a wah sound, he spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with a mouthful of teeth. Clack! 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 The leader of the Star Alliance was dumbfounded. He had never thought that he would be the one being beaten. What was going on? Shouldn't eldest miss and the others hit Yi Qianren instead? After all, the other party had pretended to be that mysterious expert and wanted to play them like fools. Thinking of this, the Star Alliance Temple Master's body suddenly stiffened. He suddenly thought of something. If he knew such an obvious fact, Mo Zhuling and the others would definitely not be mistaken. And now that Mo Zhuling and the others had attacked him, wouldn't that mean, just as he thought of this, he heard Mo Zhuling's cold voice, "Shut up. How can you slander this, sir?" As she spoke, She led a group of Star Alliance members to Yi Qianming and said softly, "Young master, I'm sorry. Our Star Alliance wasn't strict enough and caused you to suffer." Mo Zhuling's beautiful eyes stared unblinkingly at Yi Qianming. The expression on her face was incomparably shy. Chapter 22:35. At this moment, the Star Alliance Temple Master's body trembled violently because of Mo Zhuling's words. "Sir?" He looked at Yi Qianming's direction in horror, his face full of disbelief. What Yi Qianming said before was actually true. Was he really the person who killed the nine-tailed fox? But, didn't that mysterious powerhouse say that he hadn't found her yet? Duh, you're too soft, is it, wrong? The Star Alliance Temple Master's body trembled like a leaf. His face was deathly pale. He suddenly thought that Mo Zhuling and the others suddenly appeared in the true Spill continent. Was it because they were looking for Yi Qianming? Thinking of this, his teeth chattered. He wanted to cry but had no tears. How could this be? How could the man beside Luo Qingtong be the mysterious powerhouse who killed the nine-tailed fox? If this was the case, why did he hide his identity and appear in the true Spill continent? Was it just for Luo Qingtong? The Star Alliance Temple Master was terrified to the extreme at this moment. Especially when he saw Mo Zhuling lead the Star Alliance powerhouses around her to salute Yi Qianming, and those Star Alliance powerhouses didn't object at all. This made him even more afraid. These powerhouses were all convinced. It seemed that Mo Zhuling was telling the truth. Thinking of this, the Star Alliance Temple Master's eyes rolled back and he almost fainted. However, he couldn't faint. If he did, he would be dead for sure. Thinking of this, the Star Alliance Temple Master got up from the ground and rushed to Mo Zhuling. "Young miss. Listen to me," the girl beside him, "there's..." As he spoke, a vast and majestic force suddenly descended upon him from not far in front of him. Ge. The Star Alliance Temple Master's voice sounded like a rusty saw, but he couldn't utter a single word. That vast and boundless power was simply too terrifying. The Star Alliance Hall Master's eyes widened as he stared at Yi Qianxian in shock. At this moment, the power around the man's body suddenly surged violently. It turned out that he hadn't used his full strength all this time. The Star Alliance Temple Master was indescribably shocked when he saw Yi Qianxian's power. He finally realized that Yi Qianxian wasn't lying at all. The man's strength was terrifyingly strong. If he had used this kind of power at that time, he would not have had a chance to ask Mo Zhuling for help. That was indeed the case. Yi Qianren's meridians were damaged. Because he had killed the nine-tailed sky demon fox and obtained its essence, blood and soul power, he was able to repair his meridians slightly. At this moment, the nine-tailed fox's power was decreasing. In order to conserve this power and not damage his meridians too much, Yi Qianxian had been using a limited amount of power. If he could use 10% of his power, he wouldn't use 20%. Previously, because he didn't know Mo Zhuling and the others would come, he had let the Star Alliance Temple Master escape. Now, he knew that the Temple Master was going to die together with him and announced that Luo Qingtong had a sector beast in her body. Why would he give him a chance? She was his woman, so naturally, he would protect her. He had said that he wouldn't let anyone hurt her. Chapter 22:36. The Star Alliance leader's regret had reached its peak. If he had known that this man was so strong, he would never have thought about that sector beast. Instead, he would have sold the information about that sector beast to the Star Alliance. If that had happened, how much would he have benefited from it? Most importantly, Luo Qingtong, that B*TCH, would never have been able to escape being hunted down. If that had happened, no matter how strong this man was, he might not have been able to protect her. After all, the sector beast was something that defied the natural order. It was enough to drive people crazy. Unfortunately, a single mistake could lead to everlasting regret. When he had met Mo Zhuling and the others, he should not have only asked them for help and kept the matter of the sector beast a secret. The Star Alliance leader's heart was filled with regret. He had died with his eyes wide open, crushed into ashes by the power controlled by Yi Qianxian. Not even a bit of his soul was left. As for the people from the Star Alliance palace who had luckily survived the appearance of Mo Zhuling and the others, when Yi Qianxian's power erupted, they were all targeted and killed. After doing all this, Yi Qianxian slowly raised his eyes and looked at Mo Zhuling and the others in front of him. "You can leave now." Yi Qianxian was not at all interested in how Mo Zhuling and the others knew him or what their intentions were. Since these people did not attack him because of the Star Alliance palace, he would not attack them either. As he spoke, he prepared to leave with Luo Qingtong. However, at this moment, Mo Zhuling's voice suddenly rang out. "Master, are you leaving just like that?" She smiled as she looked at Yi Qianxian and Luo Qingtong. Her gaze was fixed on their intertwined hands. Her eyes were very hazy. She had almost lost her composure when she saw this scene just now. The man she had her eyes on had been taken by someone else. Mo Zhuling's heart was filled with panic. Ever since she met Yi Qianxian, she felt that no man in this world was pleasing to her eyes. The man was strong and handsome. Mo Zhuling came with the heart of a young girl. She thought that her identity as the eldest daughter of the Star Alliance would be enough to move the other party. However, before she could get to know him, there was already a woman by his side. Mo Zhuling looked at Luo Qingtong's beautiful face, which was even more beautiful than his own. He clenched his sleeves so hard that they were about to be torn apart. The only thing that comforted her was that the other party seemed to have no strength at all. Seeing that Luo Qingtong did not emit any energy fluctuations or aura, Mo Zhuling felt much more comfortable. She only used her face to seduce men. Such a woman would only be a burden to the other party. Thinking of Luo Qingtong being protected in Yi Qianxian's arms, she couldn't help him at all. Furthermore, Mo Zhuling's gaze swept across everyone present. If she guessed correctly, this woman seemed to be from this low-level continent. If that was the case, then she was even less worthy of the man in front of her. Mo Zhuling's heart was filled with disdain as she thought about it. She looked at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian and chuckled. This girl seems to have some good treasure on her. Sir, aren't you worried about her safety in the future? Mo Zhuling snorted disdainfully at this so-called treasure. After all, what good things could a low-level level 9 continent have? However, this didn't stop her from making an issue out of it. The moment she spoke, Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes coldly and turned to look at her. Chapter 2237. Interesting. This miss of the Star Alliance seemed to have taken a fancy to her man. Luo Qingtong cast a sidelong glance at Yi Qianxian with a faint smile. The meaning behind her gaze was very obvious. You always say that I wronged you. But today, I didn't wrongly accuse you, did I? Others had already come to find you, yet you still had the audacity to target me. Luo Qingtong snorted. When Yi Qianxian saw Luo Qingtong's glance and the meaning behind it, his body suddenly stiffened. He looked in Mo Zhuling's direction with a cold and angry expression and said coldly, "Are you threatening me?" Yi Qianxian's eyes, which seemed to contain the light of swords and sabers, narrowed coldly. He looked at Mo Zhuling and the others with an unusually cold gaze. He didn't care where these people had seen him or why they had come to find him. But if Luo Qingtong misunderstood him because of this, these people would not be able to escape death even if they died 10,000 times. When Yi Qianxian's words came out, the experts of the Star Alliance behind Mo Zhuling were instantly shocked. Mississippi, one of the experts of the Star Alliance, hurriedly stepped forward and whispered to Mo Zhuling, "Miss, this person's strength is unfathomable. You'd better not provoke him." The experts of the Star Alliance had already heard the intense anger in Yi Qianxian's words. They already knew that Yi Qianxian's strength was tyrannical. In addition, they also knew that he was the mysterious expert who had killed the nine-tailed celestial fox previously. They were instantly even more shocked. The prism through the ice prism wasn't particularly clear. They could only see that Yi Qianxian's strength was tyrannical from the shattering of the ice prism. But they didn't have a clear idea of how strong he was. However, with the addition of the heavenly nine-tailed fox, they immediately knew what was going on. Most of the top players of the Star Alliance, except for those who didn't go, were still recuperating. And this was the result of escaping death in the end. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, they did not want to anger Yi Qianxian. As for Mo Zhuling's little girl's thoughts, Yi Qianxian obviously looked down on Mo Zhuling. Since that was the case, it was useless for them to think highly of him. Sticking to him would only make him look cheap. Furthermore, offending a top expert like Yi Qianxian was not worth it. Mo Zhuling naturally sensed the thoughts of the Star Alliance experts. But she just couldn't accept it. She had come here full of expectations, but as soon as she saw the man, she was mercilessly dismissed by him. Not only that, the person he liked was a flower vase with no strength or ability. She only relied on her face to get the man to protect her. Moreover, she was a girl from a low-level continent. How could Mo Zhuling swallow this? Which part of her wasn't stronger than the other party? Except for her face. But what was the use of just having a face? She had the entire Star Alliance as her backing and her own talent wasn't bad either. Only someone like her was a good match for him. Mo Zhuling thought. She immediately bit her lip and ignored the dissuasion of the Star Alliance experts. She said to Yi Qianxian, "Gongzi must be joking. I'm not threatening you. I'm just reminding you." Also, she lowered her eyes slightly and suppressed the jealousy and hatred in her eyes. She said, "Young master killed someone from the Star Alliance palace in front of us." Chapter 2238. As she spoke, she glanced at Luo Qingtong and said, "It's still unknown whether this girl's treasure is related to our Star Alliance. After all, when that Star Alliance Hall Master asked us for help, he already explained the reason. This treasure was actually discovered by the people from the Star Alliance Palace. Since that's the case, they should die for offending young master. But shouldn't this girl's treasure be returned to our Star Alliance?" As she spoke, she looked at Yi Qianxian with rippling eyes and said softly, "Young master, do you think I'm wrong? Of course, if young master joins our Star Alliance and becomes a member of our Star Alliance, this matter will naturally be written off." As soon as Mo Zhuling's words came out, the Star Alliance experts were instantly shocked. Young miss. They didn't expect Mo Zhuling to be so obstinate even after they tried to stop him. Not only that, he didn't hesitate to lie and distort the truth. When did that Star Alliance Hall Master say that the girl's treasure was discovered by their Star Alliance Hall? He only said that the girl might have a treasure on her. They simply didn't care about a treasure from a low-level continent like this, let alone the young miss. The reason why Yi Qianren deliberately brought this matter up was clearly to use the treasure on that young lady to force Yi Qianren to lower his head. How could the young miss be so muddle-headed? Because of what happened with the Star Alliance Hall, the other party didn't have a good impression of them. This time, they should take advantage of the situation to leave and let the other party calm down. After their impression of them cooled down, they could approach the other party and rope him in. If it really didn't work out, then forget it. If they could maintain a friendly relationship with the other party, it would also be beneficial for their Star Alliance. Who would have thought that Mo Zhuling would do something like this? As everyone thought about it, they suddenly felt vexed. A forcibly picked melon isn't sweet. Didn't the young miss understand this principle? However, Mo Zhuling didn't think so. She wanted to keep Yi Qianxian in the Star Alliance first. This way, he would have more opportunities to interact with her in the future. At that time, when the two of them were compared, the other party would definitely know that compared to the low-level girl beside him who had nothing but a face, the other party would definitely know. She was the most suitable one for him. Therefore, she risked angering Yi Qianxian by speaking up. After all, with how much the other party valued this girl, they wouldn't put her in danger of being targeted by the Star Alliance. Mo Zhuling couldn't help but feel jealous when she recalled how the Star Alliance Palace Master had merely mentioned that the treasures on this young lady might not even be worth their attention, and yet Yi Qianming had killed her with a wave of his hand. She suppressed this emotion and quickly adjusted her mood. She raised her head and looked at Yi Qianren with sparkling eyes. What does young master think? Before Yi Qianxian could speak, Luo Qingtong on the other side laughed first. She seduced her man in front of her and even used her to threaten him. This young miss of the Star Alliance was very good. Luo Qingtong looked at the young miss of the Star Alliance's eyes and naturally knew what kind of image she had in the other party's eyes. A vase that only relied on her face? A useless piece of trash. Luo Qingtong felt that after her blood eye rose and became famous in the true Spill continent, she had never been looked down upon again. She really missed it. Chapter 2239. She raised her eyebrows slightly as she looked at the young lady of the Star Alliance, who was looking at Yi Qianxian affectionately. She suddenly had a mischievous thought. So what if she played with this young lady of the Star Alliance? She was actually very familiar with this delicate and pitiful white flower who had nothing but a pretty face. In her previous life, Luo Qingtong had tried all kinds of immoral characters in order to avoid being hunted down and killed. She had only acted as a useless vase. She was very good at it. After all, sometimes, when she was exhausted and her enemies were not completely killed, Luo Qingtong would not care about anything else. She would use all kinds of methods to pretend to be weak, lure her enemies over, and kill them in one strike. Thinking of this, the smile on her lips became even wider. Husband. Luo Qingtong pretended to be very delicate and weak as she threw herself into Yi Qianxian's arms. Then, she blinked her clear eyes, which were rippling with a bloody mist, and looked in the direction of Mo Zhuling in a coquettish and angry manner. Layers of mist rose from her eyes. Who is this lady? Why is she looking at you like that? Did you go out to attract bees and butterflies again? Whoa. How many girls have come to you already? You heartless man. You clearly said that you would only love me. As expected, you only coveted my beauty. Plop. Hearing Luo Qingtong's coquettish voice and seeing her crying face, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were instantly stunned. Especially Bei Qing, who was originally furious, suddenly took a step forward, ready to attack Mo Zhuling and the others as soon as Yi Qianxian gave the order. However, Luo Qingtong's sudden move scared him so much that he slipped and almost fell to the ground, his face covered in dirt. Fortunately, Feng Yu, who was next to him, caught him in time. Otherwise, he would have lost all his face as a leader. Oh my evil doctor! What are you doing now? Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others all looked at Luo Qingtong in shock. They had expected many reactions from Luo Qingtong. Some would be cold, some would be angry, and some would turn against their master. However, they did not expect that Luo Qingtong would act in front of Mo Zhuling. However, Feng Yu looked at Mo Zhuling sympathetically. If he was not wrong, this young mistress of the Star Alliance seemed to think that the evil doctor was a flower vase who used his looks to attract people. What's more, he was a good-for-nothing. Oh my God! Feng Yu felt he couldn't watch this anymore. This young lady of the Star Alliance would definitely regret this in the future. Those who knew how powerful the evil doctor was would be miserable if they went against her. However, those who didn't know how powerful she was would be even more miserable if they went against her. Feng Yu still remembered how Luo Qingtong had used her acting skills to trick the beast tamer Valley. At that time, the Beast Tamer Valley had been turned upside down. It was said that after the evil doctor and his master left, the Beast Tamer King Guguju was about to vomit blood. It was fine that this young lady of the Star Alliance did not know how powerful the evil doctor was. However, she still treated her like a pretty vase. She would suffer in the future. No, he would probably get a taste of his own medicine soon. Su Yu, Su Xiaoxiao, and the others behind Luo Qingtong, as well as the people from the Sky Yuan sect and the other sects, were all stunned when they saw Luo Qingtong's change in attitude. Especially those from the sections. Chapter 2240. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the feeling that Luo Qingtong gave them was that of a Tyrannosaurus Rex turning into a docile kitten. Moreover, it was the kind that meowed and acted cute. The contrast was too great. They really couldn't handle it. Just as everyone was stunned by Luo Qingtong's sudden change in expression and contrast, Luo Qingtong's expression suddenly changed. Mo Zhuling and the other experts of the Star Alliance, who were completely unaware of Luo Qingtong's original personality, looked at Luo Qingtong strangely. The style of the young girl that this expert liked was a bit strange. He actually liked this kind of delicate and pitiful girl, who was like a delicate flower that would break with a snap. However, this young girl looked like she was born with a natural charm. She was truly a rare stunner. The flirtatious charm in her eyes was truly intoxicating. It was no wonder that this expert doted on her so much. For her sake, he didn't hesitate to kill the palace master of the Star Alliance and the others in front of them. Not only that, he didn't even mind that she was from a low-level continent. Only Mo Zhuling saw Luo Qingtong throw herself into Yi Qianxian's arms. Her delicate and enchanting appearance was like a pear blossom in the rain. Her fingernails, which were hidden in her sleeves, dug deeply into her palms. Especially when she saw Yi Qianxian subconsciously block Luo Qingtong and trap her in his arms. His careful appearance was as if he was afraid that she would fall to the ground. The jealousy and anger in her heart grew even stronger. Vixen slut. She nonchalantly pulled her fingernails out of her palms and wiped them clean in her sleeves without batting an eyelid. Then, she looked at Luo Qingtong and said with a smile, "Hello, little sister. You've misunderstood. I don't have feelings for the young master." Mo Zhuling knew that even if she had feelings for Yi Qianxian, she couldn't admit it in front of him. After all, this girl called Yi Qianxian husband, which meant that the two of them were husband and wife. Since that was the case, if Mo Zhuling admitted in front of everyone that she was interested in Yi Qianxian, it would mean that she wanted to be his concubine. But how was that possible? Not to mention that Mo Zhuling himself was unwilling. Even if she was willing, Star Alliance couldn't afford to lose face like this. Mo Zhuling wanted to get rid of Luo Qingtong and take over the man by her side. As Mo Zhuling thought of this, he narrowed his eyes slightly, concealing the viciousness and coldness in his eyes. However, while she was talking enthusiastically, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianren did not bother with her at all. Luo Qi. Yi Qianxian lowered his voice and supported Luo Qingtong. He gritted his teeth subconsciously. What was this woman doing? What a load of nonsense. When did he start flirting with bees and butterflies again? And who knew how many girls he lured home? When did that happen? He didn't even know the woman in front of him, okay? Even though he knew that Luo Qingtong was acting, Yi Qianxian, who had been wrongly accused and discredited, still gritted his teeth. This woman, if she didn't give him some trouble, he would panic. To think that he was so worried that she had lost all her strength and whether there would be any problems. Now it seemed that she was in good condition. The veins on Yi Qianxian's forehead bulged slightly. When Luo Qingtong threw herself into his arms, she used the blind spot to look back at him. What are you doing? You're the only one who's allowed to flirt with bees and butterflies, but I'm not allowed to bully your sweetheart. If you didn't provoke her, why don't you tell me why she came looking for you? Chapter 2241. She lowered her head abruptly and said helplessly, "I know that you despise me for being weak. But you said that you didn't care. You men are all bad guys." Luo Qingtong said, and even imitated the melodramatic TV series of the 24th century, pounding Yi Qianqian's chest with her small fists. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others only felt their mouths twitching and their stomachs hurting. "Evil doctor, please stop acting. It's so painful to the eyes." In fact, Luo Qingtong's face was so beautiful that it could topple cities. At this moment, she was crying and looked so delicate and lovely, which was very enchanting and charming. She had an indescribable charm, just like a fairy that could captivate one's soul, causing one to be unable to take their eyes off her. However, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were used to Luo Qingtong's domineering and beautiful appearance. It was really difficult for them to associate this, delicate and pitiful girl with Luo Qingtong. They felt that their eyes were cramping and they had misjudged her. Needless to say, the people from the sects were completely dumbfounded. Yi Qianxian looked at the little woman in front of him who was addicted to acting and felt helpless. How did he fall in love with such a seductive spirit? He gritted his teeth slightly and grabbed Luo Qingtong's hand that was pounding and touching him. He accepted his fate and cooperated with her. "Yes, it's my fault," Yi Qianxian said and gritted his teeth. "I shouldn't be involved with outsiders." He took a deep breath and said, "If you don't like them, I will drive them away immediately." "Great." Luo Qingtong smiled and gave Yi Qianxian a look that said, "You are a promising child." Then she covered her face and cried, "Look, you finally admitted it." "Humph, I knew that she looked at you the same way those people looked at you when we passed by Wanhua Building that day. They couldn't wait to tear off your clothes and eat you. How can there be no relationship? Woo woo woo. You men are all liars." As Luo Qingtong spoke, she purposely stomped her feet. She acted very realistically as a woman who caught her man cheating on her and made a scene out of nothing. Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, Bei Qing and Feng Yu's lips twitched even more. Master's lifetime of wisdom. Fortunately, this place was remote and no one knew the identity of the master. Otherwise, if word got out, who knew how many jaws would drop? His master, who had always been cold, dignified and noble, like the Son of God, actually had such a helpless side, lowering his head and compromising. Or was he playing along with Luo Qingtong? This was probably something that only the evil doctor could do, right? She wanted her master to completely give up her dignity and nobility, allowing her to do whatever she wanted and pamper her. Everyone was sighing. On the other side, Mo Zhuling couldn't hold it in anymore. It was fine that her words were ignored, but Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were openly showing off their affection in front of her. Compared to Luo Qingtong's unreasonable behavior and Yi Qianxian's indulgence, Mo Zhuling felt as if her heart had been pierced. What made her clench her teeth even more was that Luo Qingtong actually said that she and those people from Wanhua Building, wasn't that the name of a brothel? She said that she was the same as the prostitutes in a brothel? Chapter 2242. She hated that she couldn't tear off Yi Qianxian's clothes and bite him. Mo Zhuling did indeed have some unknown thoughts about Yi Qianxian, but it wasn't to the extent of revealing them so blatantly. She suppressed the emotions in her eyes very well. But when Luo Qingtong said those words, it seemed as if she was really looking at Yi Qianxian shamelessly. In an instant, Mo Zhuling looked as if someone had ruthlessly ripped off a layer of his skin. He was battered and exhausted. After all, how thirsty was she? How much did she want a man? That was why she was so fixated on Yi Qianxian? To put it bluntly, brothel prostitutes had to see if the patron was rich and whether they could settle the matter with money. She was great. She had only glanced at Yi Qianxian from God knows where outside, and then eagerly came looking for him. She even used Luo Qingtong's matter to threaten Yi Qianxian to join the Star Alliance. She couldn't wait to throw herself at him. She was worse than a brothel prostitute. Luo Qingtong's short sentence seemed to be making trouble for Yi Qianxian, but in reality, she had ripped off Mo Zhuling's skin, put it on the ground, and stepped on it again and again. She made it sound as if she was worthless. Mo Zhuling's entire body trembled. She glanced at the group of Star Alliance experts beside her, only to see that they were all looking at her with a strange expression. They obviously believed Luo Qingtong's words. After all, they were standing beside Mo Zhuling. They didn't notice the way Mo Zhuling looked at Yi Qianxian earlier. But from the fact that she ignored their attempts to stop her and stubbornly wanted to use Luo Qingtong's matter to threaten Yi Qianxian and didn't hesitate to lie, they still believed Luo Qingtong's words. After all, Mo Zhuling had made it so obvious. This was simply too embarrassing. All the experts from the Star Alliance felt extremely ashamed. They knew that Mo Zhuling was interested in Yi Qianxian. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chased after him in every possible way and traveled thousands of miles to find him. For this reason, he did not hesitate to use the Alliance Master's favor in the past. But eldest miss should at least be a little more subtle, right? Now that they were caught red-handed by someone else, and it was someone else's legal wife, even if eldest young miss didn't feel ashamed, they felt ashamed. The faces of the Star Alliance experts were not looking good. They looked at Mo Zhuling with displeasure. "Young miss," a Star Alliance expert lowered his voice and said in a deep voice. His tone was very unyielding. "Please consider the Star Alliance and don't cross the line." They could not afford to lose face like this. What's more, eldest miss still had an engagement. She thought about how Mo Zhuling was still in love with Yi Qianxian despite his engagement. If Mo Zhuling was also interested in her, they would be happy to see it happen and go with the flow. But this would make it obvious that Mo Zhuling was not interested in her. If eldest miss continued to be so unforgiving, she would be throwing the Star Alliance's face to the ground and stepping on it. The Star Alliance experts could not tolerate this. If it weren't for Mo Zhuling's status, they would have forcefully dragged her back. Mo Zhuling bit down hard on her lips when she heard what the Star Alliance powerhouse said. Her pink lips were about to bleed from the force of her bite. "I didn't." She forced herself to lower her voice and blurted out these words. She did not look at Yi Qianxian that way at all. That vixen across from her was slandering her. Mo Zhuling was very sure that she did not look at Yi Qianxian like Luo Qingtong said. She hid it very well. The girl across from her said that on purpose. Mo Zhuling was jealous that Luo Qingtong could stay by Yi Qianxian's side. Chapter 2243. Apart from being unreasonable, spoiled, and willful, there was nothing good about her. What was there to like about her? Not to mention, Luo Qingtong was so insidious. She actually dared to lie to her face. She made her sound like she was worthless. Mo Zhuling was so angry that her chest heaved up and down rapidly. She had completely forgotten that she had always coveted Yi Qianxian. Luo Qingtong had only revealed her hidden thoughts. How was that slander? On the other hand, she had deliberately used Luo Qingtong to threaten Yi Qianxian because she didn't want to miss out on Yi Qianxian's eviction order. She didn't hesitate to distort the truth and say that the treasures in the land of the deceased immortals were discovered by the Star Alliance first. This was the true viciousness of slander. Luo Qingtong looked indifferently at the hatred and anger in Mo Zhuling's eyes. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. She didn't care at all. When the other party had the intention to slander her, she should have been aware of this. Why, did she think that a vase and trash like her was easy to bully? Unfortunately, even if Luo Qingtong was a useless vase, she would still let her know what it meant to suffer in silence. She coveted her man and wanted to scheme against her? The corners of Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. The wickedness and coldness in her eyes didn't disappear from the beginning. Mo Zhuling, who had been staring at Luo Qingtong angrily, saw the smile on her lips. In an instant, she clenched her fists in anger. Bastard! This woman, she really did it on purpose. Mo Zhuling was already very angry because Luo Qingtong had directly pointed out her feelings for Yi Qianxian. In addition, the persuasion of the group of Star Alliance experts made her feel extremely embarrassed. Luo Qingtong made her sound like she was worse than a prostitute who could sleep with anyone. How could she let go of the anger in her heart? Not to mention, when she saw the smile on Luo Qingtong's lips, she was so angry that her whole body trembled. This woman. She gritted her teeth. Unable to tolerate being tricked by Luo Qingtong and losing face, Mo Zhuling simply ignored the persuasion of the Star Alliance experts around him. He stepped forward and said to Yi Qianxian, "Gongzi. I wonder if you've considered what I just said?" As she spoke, she looked coldly at Luo Qingtong and said, "If you're sure that you don't want to join our Star Alliance, then we have no choice but to invite this girl to our Star Alliance." After all, as she spoke to hear, she raised her chin, her voice full of arrogance. "Even if we don't care about the treasures of this low-level 9th-class continent, it's not something that anyone can casually take. Especially since it involves the lives of the true Spill Continent Star Alliance Hall. We don't know the truth, but we must investigate." As she spoke to hear, she looked at Yi Qianxian and said, "Gongzi, you're strong, so we don't want to pursue this matter. We'll drop the matter of the Star Alliance Hall's people being killed. But the treasures on this girl's body will have to be taken out. We'll deal with them after we've determined the truth. If we're sure that the treasures are ours, then we'll naturally return them to their rightful owners. Of course, in order to prevent the treasures from being deceived by others, this girl will absolutely have to come with us to the Star Alliance." Chapter 2244. Mo Zhuling was determined to keep Yi Qianxian in the Star Alliance. She didn't believe that with her identity, appearance, talent and strength, she couldn't move the other party. He was just mesmerized by the vixen next to him. When he found out that the other party couldn't help him with anything other than trouble and embarrassment, he would know who was more suitable for him. Mo Zhuling was confident that he could take the other party. As for Luo Qingtong, she sneered at the girl opposite her. She wanted to see what the other party could do without the man's protection. After leaving the man, when the Star Alliance arrived, she had plenty of ways to deal with her. When Mo Zhuling's words sounded, Yi Qianming's eyes turned cold. He pressed down on Luo Qingtong's body that was about to straighten up and pressed her back into his arms. He knew that this woman would be happy to follow him to the Star Alliance. But Yi Qianming wouldn't allow it. Although he knew that this woman was evil and cunning, she might not be at a disadvantage. But this didn't mean that it was absolute. The Star Alliance's headquarters wasn't like other places. Yi Qianming couldn't let Luo Qingtong take risks. This woman had better behave herself. He could let her do whatever she wanted, but when it came to her safety, he absolutely couldn't. Not to mention that Luo Qingtong had lost all her strength, Yi Qianming wouldn't let her take risks. Luo Qingtong was helplessly held in the man's arms. Her small face knocked against Yi Qianming's collarbone. She raised her hand and rubbed her right cheek that was hurt from the knock. Her lips twitched slightly. Why did this man use so much strength? Was he afraid that she would agree? She wasn't that stupid. That Star Alliance's eldest miss was obviously digging a hole for her to jump into, and she even brought Yi Qianming along. She would only do as she wished if there was something wrong with her brain. Even if it was to deal with the other party, Luo Qingtong wouldn't joke about Yi Qianming's matter. Previously, when she faced Fang Jingyu outside the Graveyard of Immortals, Luo Qingtong would rather expose her identity and make the Celestial Palace and Beast-Taming King Valley hostile than use Yi Qianming as a stake. There was no way he would agree to go to Star Alliance with Mo Zhuling just because he was angry. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong felt a burst of anger. However, the corners of his lips curled up. Yi Qianming was worried about her. Luo Qingtong found a comfortable position in Yi Qianming's arms and laid there motionlessly. Since she no longer had any strength, she might as well let this man perform well. Didn't Mo Zhuling think that she was just a pretty face and not worthy of this man? Then she would just be a vase. It felt pretty good. Luo Qingtong thought of this and the corners of her lips curled up even higher. Yi Qianming was originally afraid that she wouldn't be willing to struggle, but when he saw that she only wriggled a few times in his arms and stopped moving, he immediately felt relieved. This woman had finally learned to be a little more obedient. Yi Qianming thought of this and the light in his eyes softened slightly. The cold and hard lines on his face softened a lot. He lowered his head and stared at the spiral of hair on the girl's head. There was a strange sense of satisfaction in his heart. Luo Qingtong's obedient appearance was really too rare. This kind of soft and harmless, two-faced and obedient appearance was what Yi Qianming liked the most. It was a pity that this woman would only be like this when she lost her strength. Chapter 22:45. But Yi Qianming also knew that if he really did that, he would only lose Luo Qingtong. The girl's radiance was dazzling and peerless. She had her own self-esteem and pride. She would never live by his side like a canary, like a bird in a cage without anyone to rely on. After losing her wings, the phoenix would only cry blood to the sky and die. She would never become a plaything or ornament in the hands of others. Yi Qianming loved Luo Qingtong, so he could only give her the freedom and pride to fly. Even if she would fly away proudly because of this, he would not hesitate. But, Yi Qianming gently stroked Luo Qingtong's hair on the top of her head. His phoenix would not fly far. A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in, and a pearl shines in the light. Yi Qianming believed that there was no one in this world more suitable for Luo Qingtong than him. I'll give you 3 breaths of time. Get out of here immediately. Yi Qianming gently stroked Luo Qingtong's hair. He didn't even raise his head and just said coldly. As for the treasure and the Star Alliance hall that you mentioned, within 3 days, I will send someone to send a treasure that is 100 times more valuable to the Star Alliance. This Star Alliance hall matter will be written off. Mo Zhuling obviously didn't know what Luo Qingtong got, and Yi Qianming didn't want to make a big deal out of it. After all, with Mo Zhuling's identity, a slight move would affect the whole situation. Yi Qianming didn't care about her and the Star Alliance. But if the Star Alliance people noticed that Luo Qingtong had a lot of sector beasts, then it would cause endless trouble for Luo Qingtong. Therefore, Yi Qianming didn't make a move immediately. She dared to threaten him and even used Luo Qingtong to threaten him. This young miss of the Star Alliance thought that he would give in. He had really made the wrong decision. He would only kill all of them here. The Star Alliance was nothing to him. If it wasn't for the fact that Luo Qingtong's previous strength wasn't suitable for her to go there, Yi Qianming would have already taken her away from here. Mo Zhuling didn't even have a chance to meet him. It was merely a 9-star domain. When Mo Zhuling heard Yi Qianming's words, his face turned pale. She bit her lips and looked at Yi Qianming. She didn't expect that Yi Qianming would ignore her even after she had made herself so clear. He asked him to scram. Mo Zhuling was both embarrassed and angry. She stared at the direction where Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming were leaning against each other. She bit her lips so hard that they were about to bleed. The Star Alliance experts around her were restless. The compensation of 100 times that of a high-grade continent was already enough to shock them. The strength of the other party and the depth of their foundation were absolutely not something they could imagine. They couldn't let the eldest miss continue to cause trouble like this. The other party's compensation was enough for them to settle the matter peacefully. To put it bluntly, not to mention the deaths of the true Spill Continent Star Alliance experts, even if another 10 groups died, they might not be able to match up to 1/10 of the compensation that Yi Qianming offered. What's more, the fact that Luo Qingtong's treasure belonged to the Star Alliance was originally the eldest Miss's deliberate distortion of the truth. Everyone thought about it and immediately wanted to persuade her. If the eldest Miss didn't agree, then they would take her away by force. They absolutely couldn't let the eldest Miss continue to be so willful. It didn't matter if they offended the eldest Miss because of this. After all, this matter was originally the eldest Miss' fault. If they reported this matter, the ones who would be punished would definitely not be them. On the contrary, not only were they not at fault, they were also meritorious. Everyone thought so and immediately wanted to speak. Chapter 2246. No need. We, the Star Alliance, won't take advantage of you. Mo Zhuling said resolutely. Her gaze was fixed on Luo Qingtong. Her eyes were filled with jealousy. What right did she have to receive Yi Qianxian's love and protection? How was she not better than her? But the other party just told her to get lost. As the daughter of the Star Alliance's leader, Mo Zhuling had always gotten whatever she wanted. In the Star Domain, countless young talents had expressed their goodwill to her. She had never been rejected. Nor had she been ignored so thoroughly. She saw how Yi Qianxian cared for Luo Qingtong, causing waves of anger and jealousy to rise in her heart. She definitely wouldn't let it go so easily. The other party had to go back with her. As long as she could keep the other party in the Star Alliance, she would have a chance. Mo Zhuling thought so and immediately said in a deep voice, "We, the Star Alliance, are not blackmailing you. Gongzi, please accept your compensation. As for the treasure on her, since it belongs to the Star Alliance, we must take it away. If Gongzi isn't willing to join the Star Alliance, then we can only offend you. Young Miss." The moment Mo Zhuling's words left her mouth, the Star Alliance experts around her were shocked. They couldn't help but anxiously cry out. What was the young miss trying to do? This was too much. The crowd thought. They didn't even try to persuade her and directly wanted to take her away by force. However, before they could do anything, Mo Zhuling's voice rang out again. Shut up. Her voice was cold. Her gaze swept across the Star Alliance experts. This matter concerns the honor of the Star Alliance. Whoever dares to stop me will be smearing the honor of the Star Alliance. At that time, don't blame me for being rude when I return. As soon as Mo Zhuling said that, the Star Alliance experts who were about to attack immediately froze. Mo Zhuling's words were too serious. They couldn't bear the consequences. Even though they knew that Mo Zhuling was abusing his position for personal gain, they didn't dare to act rashly when Mo Zhuling used the honor and reputation of the Star Alliance to pressure them. Young Miss. Are you stupid? A Star Alliance expert said angrily. That expert clearly had the intention to back down, but the eldest young miss just had to be overbearing. Did she think that by forcing him to join Star Alliance, he would do as she wished? She had pushed away an ally that she could have made a good relationship with for no reason, just because of her little girly thoughts. The experts of the Star Alliance found it hard to understand. At this time, Mo Zhuling looked at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian and said, "Young master. Please ask the girl beside you to come out. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what I will do. Please forgive me, young master." Mo Zhuling's lips curled into a smile, but his face was full of arrogance. She looked in Luo Qingtong's direction and sneered with disdain. So what if he had someone protecting him? She didn't believe that this man would go against the Star Alliance for her. Since he had the intention to back down, it meant that he didn't want to go against the Star Alliance. That was why Mo Zhuling had threatened her so harshly. However, she didn't know that she had completely misunderstood the cause and effect. Yi Qianxian had been willing to back down because he didn't want the Star Alliance to find out that Luo Qingtong had a sector beast. It wasn't because he was afraid of the Star Alliance. Since Mo Zhuling was so overbearing. Chapter 2247. He lowered his head and said to Luo Qingtong, "Wait here, I'll be back soon." Mo Zhuling had a lot of venerable realm powerhouses around him. And they weren't like that skeleton with an incomplete consciousness. Yi Qianxian couldn't clash with them in the True Spill continent. Otherwise, the True Spill continent would be destroyed. And Luo Qingtong and the others would also suffer. The girl didn't have any strength in her body. Yi Qianxian couldn't let her be in danger. "You stay here and protect her," he said to Feng Yu. "Yes." Feng Yu hurriedly accepted the order. Naturally, he knew his master's scruples. Yi Qianxian went out to deal with the people from the Star Alliance. If a fish escaped the net and broke into the True Spill continent, it wouldn't be good if they hurt the evil doctor. His master really planned for the evil doctor to the extreme. But his master was probably enjoying it, right? After all, the evil doctor was rarely protected by his master like this. Feng Yu secretly thought in his heart. After Yi Qianming finished instructing Feng Yu, he turned to Mo Zhuling and the others and said, "I'll go back with you." As soon as he said this, Mo Zhuling's eyes lit up. "Okay." She looked at Yi Qianming, her face full of unconcealable joy. This man had indeed compromised for the sake of the woman beside him. Mo Zhuling's lips curled up slightly. The joy in his eyes couldn't be concealed, although he still hated Luo Qingtong in his heart. But since the man had compromised, then that woman was nothing to be afraid of. Mo Zhuling chuckled, his heart full of joy. When this man went back with her to the Star Alliance and saw her identity and strength, why would he think of this woman again? There would be no harm if there was no comparison. Mo Zhuling was confident that if Yi Qianming saw her excellence, why would he fall for a useless woman like Luo Qingtong? She suddenly looked at Yi Qianming coquettishly and shyly, then turned around and led the way. A group of experts from the Star Alliance followed behind her, their hearts filled with bewilderment. They didn't know why Yi Qianming changed his mind so quickly. Looking at the man's calm expression, the powerhouses of the Star Alliance felt their hearts skip a beat. He wouldn't be planning to wipe out all of them, would he? However, the crowd quickly denied this idea. After all, although they weren't the strongest in the Star Alliance, they were still above average. A group of Green Supremacy Realm and Cyan Supremacy Realm experts were all extremely powerful among their peers. Not to mention there were other people protecting her. No matter how tyrannical the other party's strength was, he might not be able to kill them all. At that time, as long as one escaped, the entire continent would be destroyed. The other party probably wouldn't do that. With this thought in mind, everyone immediately felt relieved. In the True Spill continent. After Luo Qingtong said something to Feng Yu, she sat on the ground and prepared to meditate. She wanted to see if she could regenerate a little power from her dantian and restore her strength. She had been sucked dry, not even a little bit was left. Otherwise, the power would have been replenished by itself. Now, she had to restart the cultivation method, just like an ordinary person who had just started cultivating. She had to regenerate power from nothing. This process would take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours to 2 to 3 days. However, Luo Qingtong was a fraud. She had transmigrated. Her body had its own strength. She didn't have the experience of starting from nothing. She had to slowly explore from the basics. The time she needed to spend was much longer than the average person. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched slightly. No one would believe her if she told others about this. A dignified holy venerable realm powerhouse didn't even know the basics of cultivation. But she just didn't know. What could she do? As Luo Qingtong thought about it, her lips twitched even more. Chapter 2248. A huge whirlpool suddenly appeared beside her. Luo Qingtong's entire body was immersed in her body, and she was unaware of the outside world. When this huge vortex appeared, her eyes suddenly opened, and the consciousness in her body fiercely returned. However, it was too late. Shua. The moment she opened her eyes, Luo Qingtong's figure disappeared from the spot. Evil Doctor. Not far away, Feng Yu was slightly retreating to avoid disturbing Luo Qingtong's recovery. He was adjusting his breath as he saw this scene, and instantly turned pale with fright. He hurriedly ran over. However, this vortex was too fast for him to react. By the time he rushed in front of Luo Qingtong, the girl had already disappeared in front of him. Evil Doctor. Feng Yu reached out his hand, and only caught a mass of air that had disappeared. Luo Qingtong's entire body, such a big living person, had disappeared right in front of him just like that. When Feng Yu's figure rushed towards Luo Qingtong, Su Yu and the other sect members who were adjusting their breath and increasing their strength saw this scene. In an instant, Su Yu, Su Xiaoxiao, and the others fiercely jumped up from the ground. Not only that, but Su Yu, Ling Tianhan, and the others who were adjusting their breath and restoring their strength, abruptly interrupted their circulation of breath. They spat out blood as they rushed towards Luo Qingtong. Master! Boss! Everyone's voices were filled with tears of blood as they watched Luo Qingtong's figure disappear in front of them. What's going on? How could Master suddenly disappear in front of them? The group of people were almost crazy as they bombarded the place where Luo Qingtong had disappeared, trying to find a clue as to how Luo Qingtong had left. Just as they were about to go crazy, outside the True Spill continent, Yi Qianqian's eyes were cold as he passed through the Star Gate with Mo Zhuling and the others, and appeared in the starry sky outside the Star Gate. The True Spill continent was beneath their feet. From what Yi Qianqian and the others could see, this floating continent was a relatively large one. Such continents could be found everywhere in the starry sky. He would not leave the astral gate before reaching the venerable realm. The exalted realm was the best cultivation for a cultivator to survive in the outer realms. Although a sage realm cultivator could survive in the starry sky, there was a limit to how long they could last. He had to find another continent to enter and replenish his strength when his strength reached its limit. Otherwise, they would be crushed to death by the immense spirit qi pressure in the outer realm. This was the reason why Yi Qianqian hadn't taken Luo Qingtong to the outer space when she had reached the Saint Realm. The strength of the Saint Realm was the minimum requirement to enter the starry sky, but it wasn't the minimum requirement to survive. That kind of strength was too low, completely at the bottom of the outer realm. The slightest accident could lead to Luo Qingtong's death. Yi Qianqian naturally wouldn't let Luo Qingtong take this risk. Although he knew he could protect her. But what Luo Qingtong wanted was definitely not his constant protection and the ability to be at the bottom of the hierarchy. This was why he had told Luo Qingtong not to go to the outer realms when she was still in the Sage Realm. At that time, Yi Qianqian had already planned for Luo Qingtong to go to the land of the fallen immortals. Chapter 2249. Afterwards, she refined the immortal jade bone and increased her strength. Luo Qingtong's strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Yi Qianqian's plan had not been put to use. Thinking of the girl who always brought him great surprises and shocks, the corners of Yi Qianqian's lips curled up. But soon, he pulled them back down. Yi Qianqian coldly looked at Mo Zhuling and the others in front of him. After exiting the star door, he stopped. Bei Qing and the others behind him also stopped when they saw him stop. Each of them coldly looked at Mo Zhuling and the others in front of them. These people from the Star Alliance really didn't know what was good for them. They actually dared to threaten their master. Perhaps Mo Zhuling and the others thought that the strength of the Star Alliance was strong enough. However, if their master's strength wasn't limited, even if there were 10 or 20 Star Alliance members, he would still be able to turn them into ashes. He wouldn't give them any chance to resist. Bei Qing and the others' eyes were cold. As for Mo Zhuling and the others, they had already sensed something the moment Yi Qianren and the others stopped. "Young master, why did you stop?" Mo Zhuling looked at Yi Qianxian with sparkling eyes. She glanced at Bei Qing and the others behind Yi Qianxian and chuckled. "Young master, are you going back on your word?" She gently covered her mouth, smiling peacefully and beautifully. "Young master, do you think you can go all out now that you've left the true Spill continent? However, as the daughter of the Star Alliance's leader, I can't lack protection. Therefore, I advise young master not to waste his time. Unless you can kill me and the people around me in an instant. Otherwise, as long as one of us escapes or a piece of news spreads out, I'm afraid that the true Spill continent and the girl inside will be in big trouble." Mo Zhuling's voice was sweet. She looked at Yi Qianxian and chuckled. "So, young master, you should obediently come with me." Mo Zhuling was full of confidence. The people in front of her were not the only ones she had to protect. Yi Qianxian had left True Spill continent and no longer had any scruples, but wasn't she the same? She loved the man in front of her. Even if she had to force him, she would force him to join the Star Alliance. At that time, they would be together every day and every night. She believed that he would definitely be moved by her. Mo Zhuling looked at Yi Qianxian affectionately. "Young master, please." Her words were filled with strong confidence and pride. However, Yi Qianxian only glanced at her and did not say anything. Even the expression on his face did not change at all. Bei Qing and the others calmly looked at Mo Zhuling, their faces full of amusement. The other party could have used anything to threaten their master, but he chose to use strength. Not to mention that she had other people protecting her, even the Star Alliance's leader and the others were here to protect her. Under the full power of his master, he was still disintegrated like a chicken or a dog. The other party did not understand the extent of their master's strength. If they did not consider the damage to their meridians, how could their master kill them in an instant? An instant was enough for them to die 100 times over. Even if the Star Alliance's leader and the others were here, it would still be the same. Everyone coldly looked at Mo Zhuling and the others. Chapter 2250. Surround them. To kill them, why would he need Bei Qing and the others to attack together? Yi Qianxian didn't bring them out to surround and kill Mo Zhuling and the others. It was to surround Mo Zhuling and the others so that they wouldn't have a chance to escape and enter the true Spill continent, threatening the existence of Luo Qingtong and the others. If it weren't for this, why would Yi Qianxian bring Bei Qing and the others out? Why would he leave with Mo Zhuling and the others and wait until they were outside the true Spill continent before attacking? Young master. Seeing Bei Qing and the others disperse, Mo Zhuling's heart fiercely thumped. She looked at Yi Qianxian, her shy eyes revealing a trace of disbelief. The other party had actually attacked. Under the circumstances where he had made his words so obvious. Why? There was no benefit to him at all. He still wanted to attack. Wasn't it better to return to the Star Alliance with her? That useless woman from the true Spill continent, how was she better than her? Was it just because of her face? How could he be so reckless? Mo Zhuling's fingernails clenched. Her beautiful eyes looked in Yi Qianxian's direction, and she coldly said, "Young master. Think about it carefully. I know you are tyrannical, but with just you and the people around you, you don't have the ability to make us all stay here and not leak a single piece of information. If you stop now, I can pretend that this never happened." In Mo Zhuling's opinion, Yi Qianxian's strength was tyrannical. Before, he had seriously injured the powerhouses of the Star Alliance who had gone to hunt the nine-tailed fox. But even with such strength, he might not be able to contend with the Star Alliance. After all, the powerhouses who had gone to hunt the nine-tailed fox were not all of the Star Alliance's powerhouses. Not to mention that her father and the most powerful elders of the main hall did not participate in that hunt. Even though the other party was able to heavily injure the Star Alliance members, they didn't have the strength to kill them. Was that not the case? Now, he was actually going against the Star Alliance for the sake of a woman from a ninth-tier continent, and even wanted to kill her. This made Mo Zhuling feel as if her heart was being ruthlessly sliced by something. She simply could not accept this. She was the pride of the heavens. How could he not be comparable to a woman from a low-grade ninth-class continent? Just as Mo Zhuling was gritting his teeth in his heart, the sudden change in the aura around them caused their expressions to change instantly. This? The Star Alliance fighters around Mo Zhuling looked at Yi Qianxian in shock. The man's body exuded a terrifying power that was as vast as the long river of heaven. In that instant, all of their bodies were imprisoned. The flowing river of stars and the resplendent starry sky seemed to freeze in that instant. All of the spiritual aura around them froze in that instant. Even the aura within their bodies froze. The man's aura was so vast that it almost instantly enveloped them and the space around them. In that instant, he was the ruler of this starry sky. Wherever his aura enveloped, it was his king's domain. The terrifying power that erupted from Yi Qianxian's body made everyone tremble in fear. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.